Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecini. Today, Bryce, Simon, and I are here, and we're going to answer your reader questions that you've sent us over the last week. We're going to talk about the Portland Trailblazers, about Zion Williamson, about a whole lot of different topics. But first, let's hit the music.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Way downtown.
Bang! Bang! What's this going to be? Wow! Are you kidding me?
Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecini. But if you watch the tape, what you will see completely orchestrated this game. Bryce, what's going on, buddy?
What's up, Sam? How are you? Listen, Sam, I feel like I'm a pretty reasonable person. I get a little over the top on some things, but in general, I feel like I understand, like, you know, people have to do certain things.
I like where this is going already.
Yeah. Organizations have to do certain things. Associations, leagues have to do certain things. But I just want to get off my chest. I'm sitting down last night on my couch after going to a high school basketball game. Team won, playing to go to state on Saturday. Shout out the Lake and Bronx. And I'm like, you know what? Here we get the Oklahoma City Thunder, Memphis Grizzlies. This is a great game to watch on nationally televised ESPN. And about 2 minutes into the game, my TV freezes. And I'm like, oh, dish. Like, I'm going to have to reset the, whatever, the Joey. No, I am blacked out.
Sorry, time out. Joey? Is
That's
this like a small kangaroo?
No, that's what they're called. Dish on Dish, they're called Hoppers and Joeys.
I had no idea. Okay.
Yeah. Shout
So
out.
continue with your story.
I think we need to do some research if like this is an Australian-born company or what the deal is. Anyway, I'm blacked out of this nationally televised ESPN game. So I go to the good old handy-dandy Google Maps. I live 350 miles away from Oklahoma City in a different state.
It's tough.
Listen, I almost understand Denver, right? Like I get it. You got to black me out of one city. I get blacked out of 4 different cities, including Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I don't even know how to get there if I wanted to. It's very frustrating. I pay for
Wait,
Dish.
you're blacked out of Minnesota games?
Correct. And
That's insane. That's actually genuinely insane.
I believe the other one is San Antonio. There's 4. I get Denver, OKC, Minnesota, and then there's one of the Texas teams. And I'm pretty sure it's San Antonio because it just happened to me out of the All-Star break when the Pistons played the Spurs. And I went to watch on League Pass, which I also purchased along with Dish Network and ESPN Plus. And listen, guys, I realize there's VPNs. I use the websites to go watch this stuff when it's blacked out. I understand it's all there, but sometimes I want to sit on my couch, watch it on the big TV whenever Randy allows me to have it, which isn't very often, and just enjoy a basketball game, not having to watch it on my computer. And so I will now step off the soapbox.
I love it. Look, I agree with you. I think that like the blackout stuff at this point in a multi-connected ecosystem is pretty draconian, frankly. So yeah, no, like it doesn't, none of what you just said makes sense to me. The Minnesota thing is crazy to me. Honestly, like San Antonio is also like completely crazy to me. Oklahoma City and like Denver particularly, I kind of understand.
Sure.
But Oklahoma City is pretty far from you, as you said, 350 miles. But Minnesota, I mean, I have no idea how far Minneapolis is. That has to be crazy.
785 miles.
Yeah, it's insane. That's completely insane that you're blacked out of Minnesota. On a more positive note, I watched a movie last night, Bryce.
Okay.
It's a movie that I would imagine you have seen.
Oh, this will be fun.
I watched Field of Dreams last night.
I have not seen it. I know what it's about, but I've never watched it.
You've not seen Field of Dreams?
No.
Bryce, you have small children. Get on Field of Dreams. You need to watch Field of Dreams with your children.
Okay.
Oh my!
I know. It's one that would surprise most people that I haven't seen.
Yeah, that's one that's like genuinely, this seems up Bryce's alley. This makes sense. Yeah, I got Field of Dreams on beautiful 4K and decided to queue it up last night. Oh my God. What a genuinely insane movie. Like, I can't emphasize enough how truly crazy the plot of Field of Dreams is. It involves ghost baseball players and time travel at some point. And it's also just like a baseball movie and like kidnapping, sort of. It's insane. I would recommend watching it. I would 100% recommend watching it as soon as possible.
Real quick, since we're on this, we started Paradise the other day, I think is what it's called.
Laura and I got through 2.5 episodes of that.
So yeah, we got through 2 episodes as a parent. The second episode kind of demoralized me, and it was right before
like
bed,
pretty shattering actually.
And I did not sleep very well that night. And so like now I just kind of, not that it was bad, I just have like a bad taste in my mouth because of how it left me emotionally right before I tried to sleep. And so it's like now I have a hard time like pushing to go back to it, like finding the motivation to go back to it. So
yeah, the first episode was fantastic up until the last like 30 seconds, and I was like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
No, this is tough. This is real tough.
Yep.
Okay, let's get to some basketball questions. So you guys ask basketball questions. We will answer them now. Okay. First up, we're going to go NBA first.
Okay.
And then we will get to like NBA draft second, and then we'll answer some kind of other questions as we go later on. First, from Sager Trika, how should Blazer fans feel about their second half surge? 13-28 in the first 41, 15-6 since. Is this real, or is it akin to the 2016-17 Heat's 30-11 finish to get back to 500? How do fans cope with being out of the Cooper flag race, but probably also not a play-in or playoff team? So I think that I would be happy with this if I was a Portland fan. Because look, at the end of the day, your best case scenario was probably, I mean, it's less than a 14% chance at Cooper flag, I would argue, because you're not going to get into the mix with like, no matter what Portland did here down the stretch, they were not going to get in the mix with Charlotte, Washington, Utah, and New Orleans, right? Like those teams are just below where they are. So what, you had at the absolute best case scenario, somewhere between an 8 and 10% chance at Cooper flag. And then the number 2 pick as well, like Dylan Harper would be great, but you have a million guards as it is already on this team. You just drafted Scoot Henderson. And while I think like Dylan is another really high level chance to be a great player, I don't know, man. Like, it feels like this is so much more important to their season than all of this. So like, it's so much more important to their future, I guess, to me than all of this. So I would rather have this happening, I guess, knowing that the difference from like the 6th overall pick, which is probably where you were going to end up in all likelihood, to like the 10th or 11th overall pick. And by the way, like I wouldn't rule out a play-in run here, but like the difference there is just not drastic in terms of player value. So I would be a lot more encouraged by this, and I would be excited by the developments that we've seen from Scoot Henderson, particularly. Shaedon Sharpe has been interesting on offense. Yeah. Defensively, there are a whole lot of holes, but offensively has been way better. Donovan Clingan is starting to get like real minutes. And then the 2 wings, obviously, Denny Avdia and Toumani Camara. I mean, those guys have just been monsters the whole year. So, or at least like the last 2/3 of the year, realistically. So I would be much more excited about this than demoralized in any way.
Yeah, I think I'm with you as well. I understand the, Cooper flag, and that maybe a year from now we're looking at this Blazers roster. It's like, hey, Scoot Henderson's turned into a really good NBA point guard, but not a superstar that maybe you thought you were getting with the number 3 pick. Or, Toumani Camara is all defense, but again, just like not that. Denny's not that. Klingen's going to be a really good quality center. But my thing is, if like all of those guys end up being that, then at some point you can package a couple of them with picks and go get that player. I just pulled up since the start of the year, or the calendar year, not the season, the calendar year. Of their top 7 scorers, and this doesn't even include Klingen, it's all guys you would want. Like Jeremy Grant is there, but he's 6. No, so this is top 7. Yeah. And DeAndre Ayton is 4th, but Simons is 1st at 21. Sharp's right there. Denny has been incredible. I feel like he just attacks the paint over and over. Had some free Scoot's averaging 13.5, shooting 40% from 3 since the calendar year on almost 5 attempts. You mentioned Shaedon Sharp. We've talked about Toumani Camara, and that, again, that doesn't even include Klingen just because he doesn't have, the amount of minutes. So I think where it doesn't bother me if I was a Blazers fan is it's not like it's Jeremy Grant and DeAndre Ayton, right? Like that's where it would be like, this isn't a whole lot of fun if it was because Jeremy Grant was averaging 20 a game and DeAndre Ayton was averaging 20 a game and you were winning games because of that. Like you're winning games because of guys in their lower to mid 20s. Even if we don't think Simons is a long-term piece, him playing well is a good thing. Like him going to the playoffs and scoring 25 a game in a playoff series would be great for his trade market, even if you don't want to keep him. So I think in general, it's a positive still.
So in JD Hunt in the comments brings up, don't get why Portland setting sail from the rebuild with so little star talent is good, but the way Toronto is doing things is confusing and dangerous. I mean, they're in totally different positions in regard to the salary cap here. Because yes, Portland has the Jeremy Grant deal, and that is like a real anchor. But Anthony Simons has 1 year left on his contract and is a real trade asset that they're going to be able to move pretty easily. DeAndre Ayton has 1 year left on his contract. Their highly paid players are not locked in long-term outside of Grant. And the guys that are actually succeeding with the Blazers right now are actually their younger guys that are on great deals. Like Toumani Camara, they have him for, I believe, 2 more years and like $4 million. Denny Avdia is on one of the best contracts in the NBA. That's a podcast that Bryce and I will do probably in the next, I would say, month-ish. We'll probably do best contracts in the NBA. Denny's going to be on that because he's making, $11 million in 3 years or whatever. Scoot Henderson still on his rookie deal. And by the way, like Scoot Henderson to me, outside of Scotty Barnes, still has more ceiling than anybody else on Toronto right now, in all honesty. So yeah, like I think this is just like a totally different conversation. And oh, by the way, like they literally just signed Brandon Ingram to like this massive deal as well. So they're just like completely locked in a way where Portland is actually exiting their time where the contracts are locked in. And they're going to be flexible here moving forward.
And we didn't critique Toronto overly until they traded assets to bring in Brandon Ingram. Like that's a major difference to me as well. Listen, JD, like if Portland traded for Brandon Ingram, I would have the same take. Like I wouldn't love it there either in terms of where they're at. So I don't think those are one-to-one comparisons in my opinion in terms of that. And like you said, just let alone the contracts. Now, if you want to blame Portland for what happened before, that's fine. But like right now with where things are, I don't think that those are similar comparisons based on the fact that, the Toronto Raptors traded assets and signed Brandon Ingram to a big contract. And I did mention, like, maybe it is talent acquisition and then they make a trade for a big star. If Masai pulls that off, then I'll recant and say like, hey, he had a great plan all along and it worked out. I'm just saying right now that roster is confusing to me because of the overlapping parts and the fact there's not like this star that takes them to the next level. But again, if talent acquisition wins out and they flip it into something, sure. Every player I named for Portland, I believe, was drafted by Portland. And so, like, to me, that's the other difference as well. Like, when I'm talking about these young players playing well, kind of leading, other than Denny, obviously. So, that he would not fall into that category. I thought that was just a good value on that trade. But, and he's on a really good contract as well. So, I think the contracts is a big difference in this conversation.
Yep. So the other question I would have for you is, does this run change how I view Chauncey Billups at all? I'll ask you that question first. Does this run change how you view Chauncey at all?
No, I don't think so. I mean,
I think I agree with that for what it's worth.
yeah. No. I mean, what do we think Chauncey is bottom half of the NBA coach?
I mean, I would say I think he's like a bottom
10.
Bottom 10, bottom 5 NBA coach still. Like, I haven't seen a lot to be able to say otherwise at this point. I think he did a great job kind of adjusting on the fly and being willing to weaponize Denny a little bit more as a driver and playmaker. That's really critical to me. But yeah, no, I would say not really. That hasn't really changed my opinion on Chauncey at this point.
Yeah, I think I feel status quo.
Okay. Next question here. Let's go with this one. This is a Bryce Simon special. Both of you guys have been down on Jalen Duren's play through December, and for good reason. Can you talk about any growth you've seen these last 2 months? How much, if at all, does it change your view on his long-term fit and upside? From Beat Farm 19. Shout out to Mo Shroot over there. Okay. Bryce, I'm just going to give you the floor on this.
Yeah, so when you talk about improvements with Jalen Duren, a lot of it comes on the defensive end. That's what you want to see from him. And I will say the defensive playmaking and disruption over the last couple months has improved. He's had some big games here to start March. Didn't have a great game on Wednesday night in the loss to the Clippers, but he's rotating, he's disrupting. I am trying to watch a little closer now. Is this just something where JB empowered all of his bigs to do this? And maybe it wasn't something that was empowered with Jalen Duren before that. I do think the energy level is better. I still have major issues with his ball screen coverage in terms of his hips and his position. He has gotten better with his hands. He'll get some deflections in the pocket pass and stuff like that more. And then I will say the one thing off, everybody knows he has law of gravity. That's not a question. We don't need to discuss it. I will say I'm out on grab and goes. He doesn't need to rake it down and dribble up the floor. He needs to find Cade or Asar or whatever. But in the half court, they have done some interesting stuff, and he seems to be better under control in those situations. They've run some interesting 5-1 inverted pick and rolls with him and Cade, where the other team is just completely caught off guard and he gets to the rim. His short roll decision making has been solid for the most part. And so there are little growths in terms of fit. Real quick, the him and Asar fit is the major question here. Can you play two complete non-shooters on the floor together? They figured out a little bit of the passing chemistry, but I just highlighted a play from last night where they cut right into the same spot on a Cade drive, and that's really where the issue is. They end up taking up each other's space off the ball, cutting, and those type of things.
I think that's what really bothers me more than anything, is that they end up kind of overlapping in those spaces. I did an Asar breakdown that I haven't released yet because I want to do a little bit more digging on Asar whenever I get some time here. And that was the biggest thing that I saw, was just they keep running into each other on offense, and you're going to have to potentially make a choice, I think, on Asar versus Duren. I don't think Duren, and it's hard. I don't think that he has an innate feel for spacing and where he should sink to on the court whenever he's out there and trying to play off of Asar. It really could just be a lack of experience of playing with Asar, but Asar's played 35 games now, something like that.
Yeah, not a whole lot. I think it's a little bit more than that at this point, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and they played last year as well.
And the minutes have been down for Asar as well. He's played 41 games, but 22 minutes. He's been essentially on a minutes restriction up until this week. So,
right. So I say all this to say that I'm willing to hear out that they just haven't gotten a ton of opportunity together, but also as Brian brings up in the comments, and this is right because I looked this up a little while ago, 48% of Duren's points come on dunks. I don't know how comfortable you feel about Jalen Duren, like around the rim or anything, when he's not dunking the ball.
It's one
But
of his biggest weaknesses.
I feel terrible about
if
it.
he doesn't have momentum, he struggles. Like I've tried to highlight it all year because it's when you say he struggles around the rim, people are like, well, he's second in the NBA in dunks. I'm like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when he doesn't have momentum to the rim and he has to finish with a little hook or some touch or find like momentum and bursts off the ground whenever he's been stymied. He has struggled in those situations. Like, honestly, I feel like now he's passing the ball out more because he's realized, like, I'm not great at these shots, but it's important. I'm not sure he's like a short roll floater guy either, right? Like, that's not something we've seen a whole lot of as well. So his rim lob gravity is real, and it does create opportunities for others, but it is a little bit limited in terms of his scoring package.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then defensively, like you said, I actually agree with you. I think the hand activity has been a little bit better. Like, and that's a critical part of him. Just having a 7'5" wingspan, being willing to use the hands is something that like used to drive me insane about him. He is a 7'5" wingspan. And you have his arms at his sides when he was in ball screens. And it's just like, no, the whole point of having somebody that's this big is using the length, using the actual like size that you have to cut off angles. And that's my kind of concern with him, you know, that he's helping at least over the last little while. I feel like he has his arms out a little bit more often. I feel like he has this, like, he's using his length and hands a little bit more regularly. I still don't love his like ability to manage gaps in depth in ball screens. I think that that's not super innate yet. I guess this is where this is leading to, right? If you're the Pistons, you have an extension decision to make on him this summer, right? You are not the front office that drafted him. So you're not like connected in that way. Do you look at Jalen Duren as a guy you try to extend this summer? Do you try and play it into next season where you keep him but don't do an extension? Or do you try and move him this summer? Because those are your three options to me.
So I will say, like 2 months ago, I was very much in the camp of you just probably don't even offer him anything, because what you would offer him, he would find disrespectful and probably give you the middle finger, and probably rightfully so. As he's played better, I'm more in the camp of I would give him a offer that I don't think he would find disrespectful, but I think he would turn down, with the caveat that we still have 19 regular season games and at least one playoff series, where I'm of the mindset, whoever they play in the playoffs, I hope it's the Knicks, because I think that would be the best test for him. Not as much, well, no, it would with Mitch Rob now. So he would have to defend both aspects of the ball screen in a game or series against the Knicks. He would have to defend the lob threat in Mitchell Robinson and the stretch big in Karl Anthony Towns, which, quite honestly, Sam, that's his biggest weakness defensively, is defending stretch bigs. He's been cooked in games by Miles Turner, by Cat. And so I think that's where you get the data of, do we go in with a stronger offer and try to lock him up? Or if he really struggles down the stretch and in that playoff series, do you then go ahead and take it into next year? Here's the thing. You can't offer him less than what you offered Isaiah Stewart, because he's the starting center on this team. He's not going to take something. So you have to give something, I don't want to say substantial, but like above that number. And for those who don't know, that's a flat $15 million a year. So I think you have to at least go in the 20s. And so as the Pistons front office, where are you comfortable? And my guess is your comfortability isn't what Jalen Duren is going to want to sign up for.
I think that that's probably right. And honestly, what is a number for you? Like, what do you think Duren will want, and what do you think the Pistons should offer?
If I had to guess, I would want to come in somewhere between 20, like around 20 to 25 a year. Like, I would, if I could get Jalen Duren on 4 for $80, I would send it across and sign it up and be extremely happy. I don't think he signs that. Like, I don't think there's any way he takes that offer, because Claxton got what, 4 for 100?
Yeah.
Something like
and
that.
That deal does not look good, though.
It doesn't look
now.
good. That's correct. And so, like, that's what's kind of scary. So I think his side would say 4 for 100 is the minimum. But like, I'm not signing up right now for 4 for 120. I'm not doing 30 a year for Jalen Duren right now. Like, he's been really good the last couple months, but I'm not ready to do that yet. Not when I have team control into that next year also and can match any offer. I know you can piss people off when that happens, but I would be more comfortable. Like, I think if he finishes off this year based off what we've seen the last 2 months and keeps it into the playoffs, I would consider the Claxton deal.
Yeah, I would not.
Yeah.
That's just not a deal I'm offering Jalen Duren
Yeah.
right now. All due respect to Jalen, who I think has been interesting in a lot of respects over this last little run where they've been very good. But to me, just like a limited skill level, basically center, like I just don't know that I really truly want to like lock in that money as I'm trying to build around Cade. And if he continues to prove it in the playoffs, like I'm all for it. But yeah,
no, that's very much the caveat. It's like, I trust what we've seen these 2 months, but if over the next month and a half we see kind of a regression back to the start of the year, then I go back to I probably don't even offer him anything. Because 3 months ago, I wanted to offer him the Isaiah Stewart deal, like $15 million a year. And again, like, I assume him and his side would shove that back in your face because he's the starting center and he's going to make more than the backup. So 4 for 20 is where I would like feel comfortable. Like, I would love something like, because by the end of that deal, that's essentially the non-tax MLE, Sam. And so like, he is a starting center with a little bit of upside, depending on, and that's the other thing. Like, with all of these guys, what do you think they have left in them? We're not around it every day. We don't know his habits in terms of watching film and working out. I'm not saying there's questions about that stuff. I'm just saying we don't know. And I think your comfortability overpaying a guy a little bit has to do with the answers to those questions.
And here's going to be my last question on this with the Pistons center, because I actually think this is like a critical thing moving forward for the league, given the leap that Cade has taken this year.
Sure.
Would you prefer, and do you think Cade prefers, frankly, a rim running center? Or do you think that he prefers a spacing center? Or do you think like there's an avenue where a spacing center makes more sense if they could find one?
So I've thought about this and I find myself thinking the rim running center is the better option. I think that is what he needs. Because even Isaiah Stewart does that in a completely different way. Obviously, he's not like a lob threat or whatever. I've just found myself like wondering, okay, if I think you encourage teams to hard hedge and play higher and stuff like that, which I guess maybe Cade can beat that. I don't know. I think he likes the lob threat. It seems like him and Duren have real chemistry. And so I do think that's my other part with paying Duren. I can't like see the salary cap enough ahead. Like, if they don't pay Duren, what is the cost to replace him? You know what I mean? Like, what are you going to have to pay somebody to be that guy anyway? So are you better off paying a little bit extra? The other caveat, if you think Asar is a real piece of this with what his defense is, I think the argument there is a floor spacing center, right? Because then you can get away a little bit more with Asar's. Like, Asar kind of becomes
kind of what I was getting at, honestly.
In general, in a caveat, if you think Cade's the most important player, which everybody should, a lot of people will think Asar's the second most important player right now on the roster, then a floor spacing center sure makes a whole lot more sense.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. I think that's
hence Miles Turner is a lot of Pistons fans' favorite name, because he is an unrestricted free agent this summer. So
yeah. Okay. Next up. How do you anticipate the Brooklyn Nets use their cap space this offseason? Do you think the most likely use of it is to facilitate whatever megastar trade occurs? Because of their league-leading cap space, the offseason will go through them in a lot of ways. Am I correct? Yes, it will definitely go through them in some respect. So you can just kind of look through their sheet, and I'll pull up their sheet while we're talking as well. In terms of like the deals that they have on the books, right? They have Nick Claxton, they have Cam Johnson. Those guys are going to make like $45 million a year next year. They have Noah Clowney. They have Derek Whitehead. I don't know that like you really worry much about like Derek in terms of, your long term at this point. Apologies to Derek. You also have a $12 million cap hold for Cam Thomas. And you have, Day'Ron Sharpe, who is like a pretty real player for them moving forward. It seems like he's been pretty interesting recently. And he has a cap hold. So even with that money and even with bringing in whatever number it's going to be, right? First overall pick, second overall pick, third overall pick, you're going to have real dollars, and they have a bunch of other first round picks too, which are going to be near the end of the first. So it's probably like 8 million that you take off the top of your cap number from where they are now. It's absolutely right that they're going to have like a crazy amount of space. I would imagine that the way that this works is going to be very dependent upon what happens in the lottery. If they end up getting Cooper Flagg, I would not be surprised to see them pivot pretty quickly toward like trying to be aggressive in the star trade market as opposed to looking a different way, right? You could try and, if you get Cooper Flagg and you have Cam Johnson and you have Cam Thomas and you have, whatever you want to do with Cam Thomas long term, and you have Nick Claxton, that's actually like a core that I think you can finagle yourself into thinking, okay, if Cooper is a dude immediately, we have Cam Johnson, who looks like a good number 3, number 4 right now. If we go get whatever star comes available, because we have all of these picks moving forward, and they do have like a million picks here. Like they have at least 3, if not 4 first round picks this year. They have their own pick, I believe, next year now as well. And then they also have, I believe, a pick in 2027. They have the Knicks pick in 2027. And I think they have like another one potentially from like a weird swap with, Philly and Oklahoma City or something. In 2028, they have, I think, a swap with the Knicks. Then they have like another pick, I think, from the 76ers. And then I think in 2029, they have their own pick. They have like another like set of picks. Like they have so many picks here moving forward to be able to go get a star if they want to, that if you get Cooper, you might want to pivot here pretty quickly, but you can also afford to be patient because both Cam Johnson and Nick Claxton are under contract for another year after next year. Depending on what number you get Cam Thomas at, depending on what number you get Day'Ron Sharpe at, like you might still be very flexible. You probably will still be very flexible moving forward. So to me, it just all depends on the lottery for them. If they don't win the lottery, I think that they're looking at like short-term deals, 1+1 team option on the second year, facilitating trades, kind of everything that kind of goes around there.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing we'll know for sure is every name that is trying to get paid will be using the Brooklyn Nets as leverage. So I don't know that we can believe any report that comes out and says, so-and-so's interested in the Brooklyn Nets. As the team that has cap space this offseason, we're going to hear them mentioned a lot. But in general, they are a team that's going to drive a lot of the offseason. I think that's an important point with where the lottery stands. And I think kind of has driven our conversation about the NBA draft right now, where Cooper is in a tier of his own, and I don't know that we would feel the same way if, say, like, okay, they're going to end up third and we think they're going to get Ace Bailey. Well, that's cool, but I don't know that you're immediately, like you said, kind of pushing.
I'm not pushing in immediately with Ace Bailey. So like, here's another name here. Naz Reid.
Sure.
Honestly, that's a name that I think they should strongly consider, like almost regardless.
Yeah, I like that. Yep.
Yeah. Like that's a huge win to me if they could go out and get Naz Reid. Like there are a bunch of teams that should do this, honestly. They're the team where it's like the easiest thing in the world to go get Naz Reid because they can just pay him if they want to. They can give him 30 million and like it's fine.
So that's a really good name and example where they actually could just be that team that can outpay everybody else and bring somebody in. And like, yeah, maybe
Oklahoma City did this last year with Hartenstein.
Yep. And so, yeah, I don't mind. The other thing to take into account here is I think both of us think that Jordi Fernandez is a really good coach, right? Like what he's done this year. I realize the bottom of the play-in is just disgusting right now in the East, but I think you could easily talk yourself into sign Naz Reid, draft Cooper, like maybe that fit. You know what I mean? Like make a play here and like you're in the play in next year and then you're building this forward with this. You have your superstar, so you can go ahead and start pushing forward along with all of the other picks. And so I think that's where it makes it interesting for them, where they could all of a sudden build out a roster that can compete for at least a play in the East. And then you keep going from there with all of that. Like maybe you wait it out with like the Knicks and see what happens with them. Maybe those picks all of a sudden become valuable somehow or whatever. Like they're a very interesting team. Or like you said, then you go the other path of we facilitate trades. I would assume they'll try to take as much cap space into the regular season, like what we saw Detroit do as well, if they take that path. Or you try to make really smart signings of guys that you feel like you can flip at the deadline and acquire even more assets.
Yeah.
So you take that money and it's like, okay, let's bring these guys in on really smart deals, not overpays, smart deals of some capacity that contending teams are going to be like, yep, we will add that guy. We'll send a couple seconds and we'll send another second here and we'll send a young guy for that one. And you use the cap space in that way and then push it down the road yet another year to be a player in 2026.
Yeah, and like I've been trying to figure out, okay, let's say that like Houston does Kevin Durant or something like that, right? Is there a way for Brooklyn to get in on that and just be like, okay, maybe the Suns don't want Jalen Green in that deal because the Suns already have Bradley Beal and Devin Booker, and they probably need to like figure out a way to pivot into contention that makes more sense. Like, is there a way that you could flip like Nick Claxton for Jalen Green or something to the Suns and hope that, you know, that hits in some way, shape, or form for you? Because Jalen Green's, for a rebuilding team, Jalen Green is more interesting to me than Nick Claxton on the roster, right? So like I wonder if there are ways in where like you could try and forget even like just facilitating deals. I guess that's facilitating a deal, but like, is there a way where you could get in on like a younger rising, you know, player that could fit with a young core of, even if it's not Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, Kasparis, you know, whoever you get, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think as we've talked through this, the thing is, to your original point, the lottery is going to dictate a lot of this. Because I think you're right. If they end up with number one and they get Cooper, you want to start making every decision around that immediately. And you have some interesting pieces already that, I mean, that's Cam Johnson, Cooper Flagg, 48 minutes of Nick Claxton and Day'Ron Sharpe. I'm going to go get a point guard, right? Like I'm going to go get somebody that can really facilitate my offense for that team, whether it's a young one or a veteran or whatever, but I'm spending assets to go get that now. I want to have a guard that can facilitate those guys being at their best in 25, 26. If I end up with, like you say, if you end up with Dylan Harper, well, now it's the complete opposite, right? And how fast do you have to push it? Or, you know, let's say you fall to 5, Sam. Well, now if it's VJ, okay, well, now like he's a nice piece, but we can probably slow play it a little bit more and do some of these other things. So they have so many different avenues, and it does kind of dictate what other teams might be able to do, because they may not have that team to just send a $30 million contract to because they're not worried about it. So could kind of dictate the offseason a little bit.
Okay. If Philadelphia has success in the lottery and, you know, ends up with a top 4 pick, do you think that they actually use the pick, and this is from Shane, or do you think that they end up trading it for a further star to go more into the Embiid era?
I mean, if it's number 1, they take it. My guess, if it's not number 1, I mean, I guess you never know what scouting departments and, you know, Daryl Morey and stuff would think about an Ace or a Dylan or whatever. But based off my own evaluations and what I think they would do if I gave them my evaluation on the draft, I would say they draft Cooper at number 1. They would look to trade anything other than that.
I think that they would also very clearly keep Dylan at 2.
Okay.
Because Dylan is a big guard that really makes a ton of sense.
Next to Tyrese.
Next to Tyrese, I think, and next to Jared McCain as well. Like if that's your 3 guard triumvirate moving forward, well, you have Jared, who's smaller. You have Tyrese, who's a little bit smaller. And then you have this big facilitator in Dylan. I think that one makes a lot of sense as well. honestly, I'd be interested in like what they would do with like VJ, because VJ is smaller, but he's the kind of defender that actually really works with both of those guys as well. They would just be a little bit small, and they already just got Quentin Grimes, who it seems like is going to be a keeper there too, long term. It's a tricky spot for Philly. I don't know how they should go about managing that.
I mean, I guess my thought was like Morey's always star hunting, and he has his 3. But like, is Paul George, like, he's paid like a star, but based off what we've seen this year, I mean, maybe it is just better like you draft, right? And try to get one through the draft to add to it, and you feel like it's, max, you're paying Paul George like a star, but maybe you can get this young player that's actually a star on a rookie deal that helps offset paying Paul George too much. I don't know.
Yeah, and the issue for them is that like they can't get off the George money right now. Like I don't think anybody's doing that.
No.
I think there's like a real case that deal. I haven't asked around about this yet, but like I think there's a real case that deal is seen as more negative right now than Bradley Beal's deal, because it has the extra years on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. George is still seen as a better player than Beal league wide, but like that extra year is rough on that contract. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard because I'm never in favor of like the 2 timeline structure, right?
Yeah.
Like I think that if you're splitting into both worlds, like you're probably nowhere. But in this case, it's hard not to look at that as an interesting strategy, just because you don't know what you have now with Joel. Like that is the biggest thing that, we're going to talk about a team next that also has this issue, but like, if you don't actually know how many games your star is going to be able to play, if you don't know how you're supposed to build around this team, if you're supposed to be just like maxing out your current situation, if you're supposed to be like, all right, like we have this great like star, let's, get a guy that fits with him, or do we have to like replace him for 40 games at a time in a season? Or do we have to like, consider moving on from this team build? It's just really, really hard. It's so, I feel for those folks in Philly right now, trying to figure out how to go about building this. If it was me, like personally, I think that I would be going with the 2 timeline structure right now, because I don't think I would have a whole lot of faith in Joel moving forward. As much as I love the player, as much as I love, what he brings to the game, the knee stuff is just very concerning to me.
Yeah, I think the more we've talked through it, I actually think I would make the pick, because I think the only way the Paul George thing works is if you get a rookie, like you would have McCain and this rookie on rookie deals getting production above their numbers, and that's the only way you compensate for somebody like Paul George that's producing it way under their number, along with also hedging against maybe these 2 guys are just done. Well, let's go ahead and start restocking the cupboard with young talent. So I think I've adjusted. I think I would definitely take the pick. And I also think more so now that Morey in that front office would take the pick also.
I think even if it's ace, I think I would probably make the pick.
I think so too.
Even just because they're not super big across the front court, right? Like they actually could use a little bit more like length and size, I think, across like the 3 and the 4 spots. And I would hope that if Joel is healthy and you have Tyrese and you have Jared and you have some playmakers, you might be able to have Ace into that more like shooter role early on and let him grow from there, as opposed to having him like have to go and create early on, which I think wouldn't end well for him in the NBA. Like they have enough star power, especially if Joel is out there, to be able to make him a shooter and like let him kind of naturally and organically grow his game long term. So even like a top 3 pick, I'm still probably keeping it. I think.
Yep. Okay.
From Michael Morgan, shout out for the super chat, Michael. Does New Orleans keep their pick with Zion balling out, or do they trade it? And I think this is more where I just wanted to talk about Zion, because we got another question about Zion that I'll ask you kind of at the end of this as well. Have you seen what Zion has done like over this little time? If you haven't been paying attention to the Pelicans, like I totally understand it because
No, I watched a
know
game recently because he
been kind
actually
of a
played.
mess.
I think it was actually
Yeah,
against the Suns of all teams. Yeah. No, I was in. Yeah. As I look back through my notes, he was actually guarding Durant in that game, which was interesting. Played a lot as a primary initiator, DHOs, empty side ball screens with him and Misi or whoever was playing the five. Got to 6 to 8 feet anytime he wanted. Actually contested a lot of shots defensively. Insane athleticism and transit. Yeah,
yeah.
it was an interesting game for him.
I'm gonna be honest. Like this little 14 game stretch here that we've seen from Zion, if it's not the best I've ever seen him play, it's in the ballpark. Like he has been unbelievable over this little run because like yeah, he's not quite as explosive as he was, but the skill level just keeps improving like as he gets older. And the question for the Pelicans now to me is like, is there ever going to be a point where he's still athletic enough right now, right? And we know that he's still going to keep, you know, getting better skill wise in the same way that Blake Griffin did, right? When is that exact intersection of like crazy skill level and hopefully like maybe even adding more athleticism to what we've seen this year going to hit for Zion? And like he morphs into being like the top 5 player in the league. But over the last 14 games, Zion Williamson averaging 27 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists versus only 2.5 turnovers, shooting 63% from the field. It's been like unfathomable how good he has been for this team that's just been kind of a mess throughout the course of the season. And to me, like when you talk about trying to build around Zion moving forward, again, it just really depends on where you're selecting at the end of the day. So much of this is dependent on the lottery. I will say that for the Pelicans particularly, I like Cooper. I like Dylan. I like VJ a lot as like a guy that fits their MO of getting defenders around Zion. Casperus is like kind of interesting to me for them. And then like even Khan like makes sense for them if they end up like all the way down at number 6 or 7 to me. I probably just keep this pick, but obviously they're in like a difficult situation to try and finagle as this moves forward with Zion because again, like it feels like you can trust Zion to play, 40 games in a year. Like that's what he's averaging right now is like 40 games in a season. And it's hard to build a competent team around a superstar who is a top 15 player whenever he's playing, but is only going to play 40 games.
I think what's hard with Zion is it's the injuries, right? So he's always going to miss games. And so I think the easy thing to say would be, hey, let's just build this team like he's not going to be there. And then when he is there, we'll just incorporate him into that team. You can't do that with the way Zion plays. Like we've talked about, it's not necessarily a negative, but he has such gravity in the way he plays. And he has such an interesting style because of his talent that it's not like a 3-point shooter who you just put on the floor and he like can integrate himself. And so it's like, I think that's what's hard with Zion is he's just not there. And it's hard to like have him in and out of the lineup because everything changes so much when he's in and out of the lineup. I want to be clear. I don't think either of us would say you don't take Cooper Flag or you trade the number 1 pick because of Zion, right? Like we're taking Cooper, we're figuring that out and we're going to make it work. With the other guys, I think I would do the same. I mean, to me, yeah, he's tough. Trey Murphy is really interesting there. Like that would be the guy that I would think more of, I guess, whenever I'm thinking about taking a pick because I trust him to be available to he's had some injury stuff though also, right? So I don't know with New Orleans. Like what's DeJounte? What are we thinking DeJounte? Murray's played 62, 79, 57 and then obviously the start of this year. And who knows what you're getting with DeJounte back. I think I just take whoever's there. Wherever my pick lands, I take it and I keep moving forward. And I think it's around Trey, hopefully a healthy Zion in this pick. So
I would use this pick. It's more a question of like how you build now. If you're the Pelicans, to me, if I'm them and I'm building, I probably see where this Zion thing goes. I mean, like here's the other question we got here is like if the Hornets offered LaMelo for Zion, like who says no to that deal? Basically, like LaMelo for Zion, who says no? And to me, like it's still the Pelicans who say no to that because Zion's ceiling is just drastically better than anything we've seen from LaMelo, and LaMelo also has like real injuries that we've seen him cause him to miss swaths of seasons before.
That's a really interesting one. Yeah, I don't think either team would want to sign up for that. Like if I'm Charlotte, do I want to trade LaMelo for that injury history? I don't think I would. So yeah, and I don't think the Pelicans do either, even though I understand the idea for both where Zion fits into a spot there. That's Brandon Miller's team now, all of that. For the Pelicans, you get this, on-ball guy. But I don't think either team I'm walking away feeling great about it just because Zion's injury history. And I don't know. I'm ready for LaMelo to be in a new scenario, I guess. I have people pitch me all the time that better teammates around him and stuff like that, he's going to really flourish and contribute to winning basketball and all that. I guess I'm at the point of kind of being tired discussing it and would rather just, hey, let's see it and let's see what it looks like. And so I'm ready for that. I just don't know if I'm the Pelicans, if I'm the team that's willing to take that chance.
Yeah, I'm just not doing that. And if I'm the Hornets, I would want to know what the other offers are for LaMelo.
So that's what I was about to say. And I was going to say, unless the offers are just so bad for LaMelo that for whatever reason, that like, that's the best you can do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, look, if you're the Pelicans here moving forward, like you have a really good, like core trio, I think of Zion, Herb, and Trey, at least. Like those are the three guys where like I feel pretty good. Like Herb Jones is going to be an all defense guy long term when he's healthy. Trey looks like the next Chris Middleton vibe of like big wing who is a real shot creator who can play defense a bit. Middleton I think is a little bit better than what Trey has shown this like so far on defense, but Trey just keeps getting better and better and better every single cycle. So you do have like a real window of like dudes here who are all in the same age timeline, even if all of this like that you were planning to build with like Brandon Ingram and now DeJounte with the Achilles injury, like even if that hasn't worked out, I mean, God, like the Dyson Daniels and picks for DeJounte thing just looks like a catastrophic decision for the Pelicans as well here right now. But
I think Dylan
that's one
makes
that we
so
didn't
much
like
sense
time.
for this team, Sam. Like whenever you just talk about like
agree
this draft, obviously Cooper, but like listen, CJ is going to be on an expiring, Morey coming off the injury, hopefully he recovers fully and all of that, but I see no reason that Dylan Harper wouldn't be an exciting selection for that team. So, yeah, I think there's some names there that could make sense for them.
Okay. Next up, let's go to this like next Zion question here. It involves Zion. Who goes number one in a 2019 redraft? You have Zion, you have Ja Morant, you have Darius Garland, you have, other dudes who are like more reliably on the court. This is an interesting one from Zach Rudine.
So it's between Zion, Ja, Garland, heroes in the next tier of guys. I'm just trying to make sure there's not like a name somewhere that. Oh man. So to me, So we know the injury situation of all of these guys now. Like we know Zion has only played 200 games, and like we know that's a thing.
That's basically, do you bet on the high upsides of Zion and hope that he gets healthy? Do you bet on Ja hoping that like he gets healthy? I think I know my answer to this, honestly, and
like I feel
I
like
never would have guessed it.
Okay, like I feel like I keep defaulting to Darius just because he's like the one I trust the most, but that feels wrong.
I think my answer is Darius Garland. No, it's not. Is it? It's hard because with Darius, there are real limitations on defense, and I love Darius Garland, and I think he has been unreal, like through long swaths of this season on offense, particularly. But like in the playoffs, there are just limitations, right?
Yeah, I think that if I was looking at
This is gross.
I was looking at Jaws playoff stats the other day, and those are kind of like 3 years. He's played 19 playoff games. He averaged 27, 7, and 9. Like he had a 9-game playoff stretch where he averaged 27, 10, and 8. 27, 8, and 10, 8 rebounds, 10 assists. Shot 36% from 3 in the playoffs. I'm just like, I feel like I'm undervaluing Ja now because like we just did an awards episode where we kind of called that Jaren Jackson Jr.'s team because of, he's been the focal point offensively and then obviously defensively. I think Zion's the most upside guy, but I mean, he's played 200 games. Garland's played 365. Like Garland has played double the minutes of Zion. And for what it's worth, Ja's like right in the middle of the two. So like he's obviously missed time as well. So it's like the highest of upsides with the injury history where you have the consistency of a guy like Darius Garland. Like he's just good enough for me to make it like, okay, I can just feel good about what I know I'm going to get from this guy. But are there limitations? Like you said, then like if you're really trying to build out and win a championship, here's the other thing though. Like if you're drafting one, are you worried about that stuff yet? Or are you just, I don't know. Should you just go highest upside? Like, is the answer still Zion? Like, I feel like we're making it too complex now. Like, you just take the highest upsides.
For what it's worth, I don't think we are making it too complex.
Okay.
Do you know who's leading this draft in scoring, by the way?
Yeah. A guy that I've found myself liking more and more the more I watch him play. And now people are really going to be mad at us about our Toronto Raptors take. But, yeah, it's RJ Barrett. I mean,
it's RJ Barrett.
And total points.
In total points, yeah. So I think my answer here is probably Garland, is where I'm at. And the reason for that is I can trust him to be on the court. And I can trust that he is like a genuinely awesome offensive player. And I just don't think I would want the uncertainty of like having to deal with the superstar player who is out of the lineup half of the time. Having said that, though, like here's another thing that an NBA executive brought up to me 2 days ago on the phone. Zion's contract now is like a huge bargain because he's getting paid like a 25% superstar.
Oh yeah.
And when he's on the court,
he's a max.
He's a 35 super max guy. Yeah. So like the contract is even way different to me. And I personally would go Garland over Ja. Like just I would rather have the shooting in the playoffs than like the crazy explosive like athleticism. And plus Garland just has fewer injury risks than Ja does to me long term. This is gross. This is a gross question. I think I would go Garland 1, Zion 2, Ja 3 is where I'm at.
Okay, so this is an awesome question. I love whenever it kind of.
This is an amazing question.
It's an
I might do this now, like at the Athletic, and like do a redraft there. This is a great question.
Here's my question: would they be in the same tier? Because if they're in the same tier, then not to give us a cop out, then it does come down to kind of your team construct, your team philosophy, your coaching style. Because at the end of the day, that stuff does become important because these three players are vastly different basketball players. Like, even though Garland and Morant are both guards, they win in different ways. And so, like, if I'm Garland, do I have a big behind him that's going to protect him, like a Jarrett Allen or an Evan Mobley? Because if I have that guy, I may be inclined to be a little more okay with some of the defensive question marks. Or do I need do I play super up tempo? And am I going to be a top 5 pace team in the league, Sam? Because if I am, then I may want John Morant. Do I not have, you know what I mean? And so are they at least in the same tier where that stuff actually becomes a huge part of the decision?
Zion's not in the same tier as these guys. Like, Zion's in a different tier than these guys to me.
But taking into account.
Yeah, I'm not, man, I don't know. It's hard because like they all have, like Shane brings this up, like they all have defensive question marks too, is the thing. And I think it's probably easier to deal with like Zion's defensive questions than like just the size related defensive questions of John Darius. But yeah, it's hard. It's really, really hard.
I feel better after talking through it about my natural instinct to go with Darius than what I thought I would be. I thought we would talk ourselves through it and Darius would end up third and we would end up with Ja and Zion, some combination of 1-2. I feel better about like my natural gut instinct as I look through the names being him, which is kind of crazy because I wouldn't have thought. Darius is really, really good. Unfortunate injury with Kyrie, and now he was already all NBA for you, and now he would be for me with Kyrie not going to be able to make it. Like, that's an all NBA talent this year. So
yeah, it's hard. Okay. Before we get to the NBA draft questions, let's stop and thank the sponsors here real quick. Shout out to the good folks over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. We love PrizePicks here at Game Theory because of how easy they make it to get real money sports action. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. If you think Zion's going to go crazy, if you think he's going to go over 25, 30 points again, if you think Steph's going to go nuts now that he has Jimmy Butler next to him, you can make those picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. Download the app today and use the code GameTheory to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use code GameTheory to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Our second sponsor today, NUTRAFOL. Shout out the good folks over at NUTRAFOL. This year, there is absolutely nothing holding you back from loving your hair again. Hair is so much more than what you see on the surface. It's a reflection of what's happening inside. Let NUTRAFOL target the key root causes of your thinning hair and help you go stronger, healthier strands from within. NUTRAFOL is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand, trusted by over 1.5 million people. See thicker, stronger, faster growing hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with NUTRAFOL. It is a physician-formulated, 100% drug-free ingredient thing that you take that supports healthy hair growth from within by targeting key root causes of what's going on, from stress, hormones, aging, nutrition, lifestyle, and metabolism. They use a whole body health experience to be able to figure out what you need in order to help stimulate your hair. Start your hair growth journey with NUTRAFOL. For a limited time, NUTRAFOL is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to NUTRAFOL.com and enter the code GAMETHEORY. Find out why over 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend NUTRAFOL for healthier hair. NUTRAFOL, spelled NUTRAFOL.com, promo code Game Theory. That's NUTRAFOL.com, promo code Game Theory. Okay, Bryce, you ready to jump into some NBA draft stuff?
Let's do it.
Okay. Let's go. Where do we want to go first? Let's do this one first. Can you rank the top 5 prospects in this class in terms of ceiling outside of the consensus top 5 players?
Ooh. Okay. Fears is one of them for me.
I'll hear it out.
Common would be one for me, even though I think we disagree on that.
Yeah, Common would not be one of these guys for me.
Yeah.
I think Common's like an interesting like top 20 pick for sure. And like I will be fine if someone takes him in the lottery, but I see him more as like a, you know, he'll be in the NBA for a while.
Yeah, you've warmed up to Common because you see like he can provide practical stuff. I'm still trying to live in the different archetype of big. Ben Seraph for me, but I love Ben Seraph, so I'm assuming I'll be alone on that one. Yegor, I think, probably would be here because if he ever shoots, I think that's big time. That's 4. Maybe CMB, maybe, because the defense is so good, and I've heard that he can shoot, and if he can shoot, I think he becomes a really good player in the NBA.
So what you're looking for me on these things is like, what happens if outlier growth happens in a skill that we don't particularly rank highly?
Sure.
Right. The more I watch Ben Seraph, I'm almost like getting like somewhat lower on him.
Okay.
While also acknowledging that like if he shoots, he's a serious player.
Yeah.
Like there's like some Ginobili-ish like upside qualities here if he shoots it at a high level. It's just like, do you trust the shot? Like there's a lot to fix there with the jumper. Like his elbow is like not totally underneath the ball. I think his shot prep like has a lot of work to do. There's some real stuff to fix there. And I would go him over Fears for this because I think his like natural passing feel and playmaking ability is just like serious. Like if it ever comes together and he can shoot with that deceleration, with that passing ability, like as long as he gets stronger, like it's going to be pretty sick, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on the jumper. It's the more I've watched, the more I've gotten nervous about the jumper. I also watch him create insane separation, his start-stop, like all of that stuff. I've actually moved him down my board also, but I mean, he's still in the lottery for me, where I think for most he's not. But
yeah,
I think he has some real stuff to his game that I like him as an answer here.
I think that my next answer here will probably just be Trey Johnson. Like Trey Johnson's a guy that I've like kind of just continued to warm up to the more that, you know, I watch Texas and the more that I kind of figure out where the passing is. Early on, I was really worried that the passing was going to be like a significant issue. And I've cooled on that a little bit. Like I think that he makes enough passing reads to where I don't think it's anywhere near Cam Thomas level disaster. And he's like, I'm almost comparing him now to like, what if I told you were getting a bigger Malik Beasley?
Sure.
Like, I don't know if I trust him separating from anybody in the NBA, but I think he's a real shooter. I think he's like a serious shooter. I think he makes the right rotations defensively. Like he's not disruptive in any way, shape, or form, but like he knows where he's supposed to be. Probably has a little bit more juice, but like Malik has some juice off the bounce. Like it's not like I'm not like sitting here saying that that's like a hyper negative. Malik's averaging 16 points a game on, what is he shooting? Like 48, 42, 85 this year or something?
I don't think the overall is that high, but yeah, I mean, he's getting in a variety of ways, and he does. He's at 44. He does just enough off the bounce to keep you honest, right? Like if you want to fully run him off and play over the top on a closeout or a trail on a screen or whatever, he will attack you off the bounce and he'll get into a floater. He'll get all the way to the rim. Like honestly, like I don't know that I have a whole lot of memories this season of Malik making great passing reads, which may be an advantage that Trey Johnson, something Trey Johnson ends up having more than what Malik Beasley has.
Yeah.
I had to look at Synergy today to see he's 54%. It's only 28 attempts, but still on off-screen 3-point attempts this year.
Yeah.
And
no, he's a real shooter. Like real shooter.
I would have lost money saying he had taken more dribble threes than catch and shoot. And I would have lost money. He's 42% on catch and shoot. And then I went back and looked at my notes and it's like, good off-ball relocation, understanding where to be, like that type of stuff. Tough corner 3-point make off a screen, off a baseline out of bounds. And it's like, okay, I can start to see more of this off-ball shot maker, which I buy into way more than an on-ball shot creator for himself because of the lack of speed and twitch and stuff like that. If you're telling me he's just a big-time shooter that you can run off screens along with some of the passing at his size, I like that archetype a whole lot more for Trey Johnson.
Yeah, the more that I watch Trey, the more that I think he's probably going to end up in like the 6 or 7 spot for me this cycle. And
he's there for me now. Spoiler.
It's just not my player type, really. Honestly, these are just the player types I tend not to love. But like right now, I wouldn't say I have any of these guys like in a different tier than, Jace Richardson, Derek Queen, Liam McNeely, but like him, Con, and Colin Murray Boyles are like a little mini group for me right now in like that 6, 7, 8 range. And Colin Murray Boyles is another one that we should bring up because like if Colin Murray Boyles shoots threes, if you believe in that skill set, being able to improve in any way, shape, or form, he's awesome. Like he is a serious NBA player because he is awesome on defense. He's super strong. If you think the weight can like even thin out a little bit more, there are like some real high-end outcomes there too.
Great touch around the rim. So now he would have different levels of scoring ability because I trust him around the rim, even at his size. Yeah. If he spaces, he's going to end up again, I've had people tell me he can shoot. If I knew that for a fact, he would be a top 5 pick for me. I just don't know that we've seen anything to fully trust it outside of the touch that I mentioned.
Yeah, it's actually a good question. If you guaranteed for me that Colin Murray Boyles could shoot, where would I have him ranked? Definitely top 5. I would definitely have him in the top 5.
I mean, if I knew he was, definitely.
I think that's right. Anybody else here? I mean, like Jace Richardson, like that dude just continues to absolutely ball out the opportunities he gets to be able to play on the ball. And if he can keep doing that, then I mean, I don't know. Like he's a guy that didn't have a ton of on-ball opportunities at Columbus playing with the Boozers and like hasn't gotten crazy opportunities up until lately at Michigan State this year. I don't know, man. Like you could pretty easily sell me that like he's just turning in a corner here and just figuring out what he's capable of on the ball and like really sell me on like a ceiling pitch for him. He's just a little bit small is the issue.
Yeah. No, he's really good. I feel like you kind of put me on him first and then I fell in love with him once I watched him. And I feel like over here between your big boards and our mock drafts, we're kind of the only people with him in the lottery right now. And I'm interested to see how that ends up playing out. A lot of people have him into the first round, but I think we're definitely higher on him than most.
And then like, look, the last guy here is Jeremiah Fears, right? Like you mentioned him. He has the real speed and like the handle to be this kind of player. I just don't love the decision-making processes right now. And that worries me to an extent. But I mean, look, like he just dropped 31 on Missouri. last night and like was ridiculous in that game. He had an awesome game. What was the game? I can't
Mississippi
remember.
State.
Mississippi State, he had 27 and 10. Yep.
3 of his last 5. Missouri, he gave 31, 4 and 5 on really good efficiency. Then he gave 27 to Mississippi State on really good efficiency. 27, 5 and 10, by the way, in that game. And then he also had 22 against Florida, where he was 4 of 8 from 3.
I'm gonna hold off on the Florida game. Like that is a game that I've like scouted pretty in depth.
Okay, yeah.
He had 14 at halftime in a game where Oklahoma was down 22. He was good for the first like 5 minutes of that game, or maybe like 8 minutes of that game. But like after that, I didn't think it was particularly impressive.
I will say, I think when we did the mock, he had a negative assist to turnover ratio in conference play. He has turned that round a little bit. He's at least positive assist to turnover ratio. The overall like field goal, 3-point percentage, that stuff isn't great. He does get to the line a lot and shoots it well at the line. So I still find him interesting, especially as we see some of these big games. Would love to see Oklahoma, some March tournament games from them to evaluate him even more.
And even so, like over these last 16 games, like Fears, even with these huge games now against, Mississippi State and Missouri, because he was quite poor against Ole Miss, you're still looking at a guy who is shooting 40, 25, 85 over his last 16 with he does have a slightly positive now assist to turnover, which is good, but like he's still averaging like 4 assists per game. Like it's not like a crazy number. I'm not there on him being like the primary decision maker for a team. And I feel like his game is very on ball in a way that is worrisome, but look, he's extremely young. And the thing that I keep saying about Fears is like these kids who reclassify up into college and are like a year younger typically than what their class is, they are like universally almost never successful in their first year. Like you can go to the Derek Thorntons, the Christian Landers, even like Kyra Lewis did this. He was not very good his first year. There are a ton of other examples. Ashton Hagans is an example of this. Like these guys are really, really, really bad most of the time. And Fears is definitely not that. He's actually quite good. So for the age and the role, I don't know. There's a lot there to where like I can't dismiss it at all.
Yeah. No, I just when you look at this specific question, I think he's an interesting name. For this specific question. The thing I always like to talk, and I don't do a great job of it, like when you talk ceiling or floor or whatever, I always like to put some sort of percentage outcome to those things because it's easy to say what his player's ceiling is, but it's like, what are the chances that actually hits? Because that's the important part, is weighing percentage chance outcome of this ceiling versus perhaps a lower ceiling that has a much higher percentage outcome, and then the pros and cons and risk reward of that dynamic. So.
Sorry, I got a phone call and it like cut out.
I'm like, I'm done, Sam. You can go ahead.
Every time I get a call, it like cuts out very quickly. And it was just the worst timing possible there. Okay. If the Hornets get the 2nd overall pick, do they take Dylan Harper, and do they then trade LaMelo? Hopefully you get VJ Edgecombe, but we don't have to focus on. So basically, like if the Hornets get the number 2 overall pick, which by the way, as of this specific moment, that's where they are slated to pick. So this is like a real factor for them. Do they just take Dylan Harper and then like look to move LaMelo? I mean, look, I know what my answer is to this, but
you would take you would take Dylan Harper no matter what, right?
It's not even a question to me. I'm taking Dylan.
Yeah, I think I would take Dylan as well, with the caveat that I think VJ makes a ton of sense for that team. If you're keeping LaMelo, we don't think they have to trade LaMelo if they draft Dylan Harper, though, right? Like, don't you see what that looks like at least for a year or something? Or do you automatically?
I mean, look, I think I'm probably a little bit more willing to explore the LaMelo market
Sure.
than what
I'm just saying,
other people are.
I don't think drafting Dylan says you I don't think you lose all leverage. And it's like, nope, LaMelo has to get out of here. This can't work. We're not going to play these two guys together at all. I'm not saying it's a
No,
great fit.
no, you don't have to do that at all. Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah. Look, like nobody's going to sit here and deny LaMelo's talent.
Yeah.
Like he's one of the 15 most talented players in the NBA to me. He just hasn't regulated his decision-making processes yet in any way, shape, or form. And like, look, I know that Hornets fans love to say that, look who he's playing with, look at the team around him, look at like everything that goes into that, look at the injuries they've had. I get it. But like Brandon Miller, Miles Bridges, like those are real NBA players. Like Mark Williams, I'm not a big Mark Williams guy. Like Mark Williams is like a fairly real NBA player. I know that Grant Williams, is hurt, and like Josh Green was like a pretty useful player on a Dallas team that, has been competitive the last couple of years and has started like a bunch of games this year for the Hornets. Cody Martin was like an adult in the room, right? Like it's not like they're an untalented. Look, they are one of the least talented teams in the league, and they have dealt with a lot of injuries. But I don't think they are so untalented that LaMelo should be playing the way that he often plays when surrounded by these players. And look, like Trey Mann is hurt, so they didn't get a chance to have like a secondary creator out there for a large swath of the season. And like Brandon Miller obviously is out for the year, as we've talked about recently on this show. Like, I get it that the injuries are a serious concern, but also you're an organization under new ownership, under a new front office, under a new coaching staff that is trying to build habits and is trying to build a culture. And you can look at the way that the Nets have done things where they don't have a LaMelo Ball like level star right now. And they just look a lot more competent. Like I wouldn't say the Nets are drastically more talented right now than the Charlotte Hornets. And yet they still look a lot more, dangerous to good teams and competent on a night to night basis, even than when the Hornets do when LaMelo plays. So none of this is to discuss LaMelo's talent in a way that reduces that, because it's real. Like this dude is unbelievable. The way he can see over the top of the defense and make passing reads, the way that he's able to get to his pull up shot. There's some serious talent there, but he needs to make some adjustments in how he plays. Otherwise, I would not want him to be the guy who is like running the show for my organization at this point. And the way that he plays is so domineering that I really struggle. I struggle a lot with LaMelo. Even being as enormous a fan of the talent as I am. The injuries, like again, like I don't want to reduce the injury factor here. Like the injuries are real, undeniably, and like it makes it hard to evaluate him at times. It absolutely does. But like we're working off of a 5-year sample here of him being like 5% below league average in terms of true shooting percentage efficiency, right? And the turnovers like don't get better. The defense absolutely has not gotten better. Like he is a serious issue on them or on that side of the court. The effort is not nearly as engaged as he needs to be. So again, the talent is there. Like he just needs to have like a regulatory system where he hits his teammates more consistently. And I just don't. It's hard when you're working off of 5 years of him not doing that regularly, on top of the injury concerns that are a consistent present factor with him.
Yeah. I mean, I was looking through that 51 games, 75 games, and then the last 3 years, 36, 22, 39 this season. So it's something that snuck up, but his second year where he was an all-star and, put up really solid numbers that year and being played 75 games. But yeah, Charlotte's in an interesting spot, right? Like, what happens with Mark Williams moves forward, Brandon Miller. Obviously,
right.
I thought I was going to take a big jump. We didn't quite see the jump I thought. Plus the injury, you're going to have this top 5 pick. Where do you go with that pick in terms of fitting into all of this? And if it is a Dylan Harper, how does that end up meshing? I just don't think it means you have to make a move immediately.
No.
It doesn't put you in a corner, but it may end up, hey, he ends up being as good as we think. It's not working out perfectly with LaMelo. Okay, we will go ahead and move on. And as I mentioned earlier, I would love to see LaMelo in a different type of situation. Like you said, everybody says there's no talent around him. I'm ready to see him with talent around him, maybe even another kind of alpha type player. And then we can really, evaluate him on, okay, is he willing to do all of these things that quote unquote contribute to winning basketball? Or is it really just a product of like, this team's not that great, not that talented, and he struggles to find the consistency with it?
Yeah. No, I mean, like, I would like to see it. Like, genuinely, like, I would like to see LaMelo with a consistent, good team around him. And look, like, I guess that Hornets fans will say, we saw it in 2022 when Borrego was there and they had, Miles Bridges was, playing really well that year, and Rozier was there for the full year. And, PJ Washington played a bunch, and, he carried them to, I can't remember if they made the playoffs that year or not, but like, carried them certainly to like an above average mark, right? Like, I think they were like, 42 and 40 or something like that year. So I do understand it on that level too, but I don't think that you can win playing the way that LaMelo plays right now. That's not to say that he can't change necessarily either, though. And that's what it's going to come down to me.
So they went.
Can he make that adjustment?
They went 43-39. They were the 10 seed. They lost by 30 to the Hawks in the play-in game.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see here. This was one that I got from Ryan Supplet. Which 2024 draft prospect made the worst decision to become a 2025 draft prospect, and why is it Hunter Salas? So I actually think that Salas is probably the right answer.
Yeah.
Because he had the monster shooting year and like, had me convinced even that like the shot had turned a little bit.
Yep.
And like, he's just shooting terribly this year. Salas is an example here. Caravan's a name that I've gotten from some people, but like, I think Caravan is just like the situation around him. Like, he's not a creator. He's a guy that plays well with good guys around him.
Yeah. I think Salas, I'm trying to look through my board, probably the name that dropped. I love Hunter Salas, and I thought he was a first round pick last year for me. And maybe I was just,
I had him late first. Yeah. I had him like at 30 or something. Yeah.
And like, quite frankly, I just flat out don't right now. And I probably should have him lower than what I do. I'm just like holding on to I love watching that dude play basketball last season. So that is probably the right answer. Again, I'm trying to look at some other names. Like, are there guys that kind of fell out of, like, what is Tucker DeVries? Like, would he have gotten drafted last year, coming back and getting injured?
He would have been a two-way regardless.
So probably didn't bump him that bad for him. Yeah, Hunter's a great name. I don't know that I agree with Caravan, but I may be staying higher than others right now. So that might not be the case.
Yeah. Okay. From Mr. Ed, if given the opportunity to be employed by an NBA team, which one would you prefer, and which team would you avoid like the plague? I mean, look, like the Bulls are the answer in terms of the latter. Like, I know that, just like that, from what I understand, like, it's not like they put a lot of resources into the front office in terms of like payment structure necessarily. They're probably like a little bit below average in that regard. Plus, from, just everything going on there, it seems like that front office could be on borrowed time, and that just seems very complicated to me.
Sure.
I don't know if you have a different answer there. Like, sure, like, I think some people would say Charlotte, but like, Charlotte just brought in new ownership that's like very committed to this thing. It's all about like, do you trust the owners or not?
Sure.
with this question. Like Charlotte just brought in new owners and like they seem very committed. And I think that Jeff Peterson's a sharp guy. And like, I think that there's a number of stuff that like I actually kind of buy into what they're doing in some respect.
I mean, like my personal answers would be like New York and LA because I don't want to live there. Like I'm terrified. I'm terrified of New York City.
Well, yeah, like that's the thing too. Like I'm not moving. Like look, like it's not. I think I've said this before on the show, but like it's not a secret that like NBA teams, have asked me before, like how interested am I in this, right? Like I don't think people are surprised by that necessarily, and like part of it is that I really enjoyed living here in Australia. Like my wife is super happy here. I'm super happy here. Like I'm not trying to move. You know what I mean? And I like the job I have now.
Okay, here's that's a really fun question. Here's the question that it made me think of for myself. What role would you most want? Like, would you want to be in the like overall GM overarching like spot, whether it's GM or whatever, like the entire roster? Would you want to just be like NBA draft scouting, just NBA scouting? Is there a player development role? Is there a coaching role? Like, I know what my answer is. If I could, like, if 30 teams call, well, one team called, like if OKC called, like, Bryce, we'll give you a role within the organization. You pick the spot. I know exactly which spot I would want. Do you, like, would it be NBA draft? Because I would assume you would want to be, like, head of NBA draft scouting, but that may not be the case. Maybe you'd want to make all of the overarching decisions and, like,
I mean, yeah, I would want to, like, all things being equal here in terms of like, if somebody offered me the opportunity, which nobody's going to offer me the opportunity to run a front office like day one, I mean? Like, yeah, I would want the top one. I'd want the top,
I'm not
for sure.
Take out like top, like just what part of it though? Like, let's say it's not GM, like you can be like, to my point is I would want to be a video guy. I wouldn't want to get in on the NBA draft, like, scout part. Like I would want to be the guy that watches film with the players. Like that is the role I would want to go be a part of, which obviously isn't.
That's almost more like the coaching side.
Yeah, I don't want to be on the court. Like I don't want to be an assistant that sits there, and I sure as hell don't want to be the guy that decides whether we challenge an instant replay or not. That job sucks. Forget that. You couldn't pay me $1 million to do that. But if I could just break down film for guys on the team and either watch it with them or whatever, that would be the role that I would want above anything else.
Yeah. I think that like what I am always interested in is like the strategy of overarching roster building.
Okay.
So like it would
want to be in that realm, the GM room realm.
The strategic, like overarching big picture of how do we go about maximizing our assets and our standing in with what we have and what we don't have. I think that's and the next question here is like what team would you want to work for? I mean, look, like to me it's all about like working for people that you think are sharp and like are really smart and like you're going to learn from and grow from. Like like I think the world of like what Brad Stevens has built in Boston. Yeah, sure. Like I think the world of, how Miami has gone about like developing its, players and using like an overall strategy to, facilitate a roster that makes sense. Oklahoma City is probably like the number one to me. Like I'm not real interested in living in Oklahoma, but like the way that they go about it is the exact way that I go about things. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean,
obviously, like literally like our like, trust me, as someone who like, has talked to people that work there, like the way I think about things is very similar to the way they think about things.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's what, for me, it would be like, I've learned the more I've gone through life that it's all about relationships with me. Like, especially as I get older, and that's like with you doing this podcast. If we just got on, recorded, and then we never spoke, we never talked about life or what else is going on in our life or our family.
Yeah, totally.
Like whenever my youngest kid cracked his head open, like I sent you pictures and we talked about it. And like you were one of the first people who I was like, I mean, he was obviously fine, but I'm like, who you share stuff with. To my point is, I would want the organization where that was the feel. And I'm not saying organizations have to run that way. I'm sure some people would say, like, that's not how you should run an NBA team. And I get it. That's just where I want to work. That's how my school is. That's how you are as a podcast person. That's how Amari is on the other podcasts I do. That's just how I want to live life and have people around me. So the organization that offered that is the one I would want to work for. I obviously have zero insight to which one would be the best at that. So I don't have a great answer, but that would be what I would look for.
Yeah. And like another team that, it's no secret. Like I talk about Memphis all the time. Like I think Memphis does a great job.
Yeah.
And like, I think quite similarly to the way that they go about business. So it's more about like alignment of vision in how you think about things more than anything. And like those are the ones that to me, like I'm a little bit more, aligned with in terms of how I think about and like process information, I guess is the way to put it.
Yeah.
So I guess those are probably the answers for me, I guess. Okay. This is a fun one because I've been trying to figure out Asa Newell as well. So from Mark C, how does Asa Newell project to the NBA? Being big and strong helps a ton, but I have concerns over lack of NBA size paired with a relatively mediocre offensive skill set.
Yeah.
Same. But here's the thing. Like, I think he has good hands. I think that he is really capable of just making an impact with his length and athleticism out there. And he like wants to make an impact with his length and athleticism. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's super active. I think he has a good like nose for the ball and like feel for all of that. If you think you can like trust the shot to continue to grow and develop, I think that like where I'm at on Asa is like it's probably best as like a third big.
Yeah.
More than anything, but there's some ceiling there, I think.
Listen, I was really high on Asa at one point, and he's another guy I've slowly moved down as I've moved to you, same as you. I've moved Trey Johnson up my board, Colin Murray-Boyles up my board, Derek Queen up my board. I find myself more and more nervous about the offensive stuff. Like, how much is the shooting going to be real? But along with it, like, how much do we buy the true big man stuff, right? Like, how much of a lob threat is he? Like, I see times where he does have some of that quick twitch off the court, but is it enough, right? If the other stuff doesn't come around, but what's the short roll stuff going to be? And so like at one point I was like, okay, like evaluating him as this like skilled big that was gonna be able to shoot it, go off the bounce. And it's like, okay, that stuff hasn't come around as good. Well, now what is the true big man stuff? I like him defensively. I love him on the offensive boards. His second jump's really good, all of that. But to the question, I think the person that asked the question was kind of spot on with their evaluation of Asa Newell, where it's like it's very intriguing, but there's some real offensive worries and concerns that if these things don't hit, it could not go well.
Yeah, no, I agree. Interesting player. Like, where do you have him right now?
Into the lottery, mid first round now, as opposed to where I had him as a top 10 guy for a lot of the year. So
yeah, I have him mid first right now.
Yeah.
Like, for as much as like I question Jeremiah Fears, right? Like I do have Jeremiah Fears ahead of him.
Yep.
Right now, personally.
Yeah.
So, okay. Who is the player in this draft who's most likely to go from mediocre shooter before the draft to really good shooter in the NBA? From Stat Center.
That's not fair.
It's a good question.
You know who I want it to be? And this guy is a bad three-point shooter right now, but I love this kid, KJ Lewis.
It'd be really fun if he could shoot. Yeah.
And here's what I'll say. The only reason he's a career 81% free throw shooter, but he can flat out guard. He's shown the passing chops. So like, this is the player I can't quit. And he's the player that I'm like, is it just something in his head right now? Like, is he just like, what is it? But maybe the free throw percentage will turn out to be the overwhelming, like he can actually make shots, even if it's just out of the corner. I'm not saying this is like who I would bet on, but it's who I want to.
I think my answer for this would be Miles Bird.
So that was another name I was going to bring up. Sure.
Yeah. So he's at like 30.7 from three right now, but he takes a ton of them. He looks confident taking them. He's an 83% free throw shooter for his career. I think with him, it's more just like the strength right now to like repeat mechanics consistently. And also, like, that offense just doesn't lead to a lot of open threes for him, in my opinion. Like, it feels like he's taking a lot of difficult shots that are just like harder to make, right? Where he's getting contested or late contests. I mean, like, look, like a couple people in the comments have mentioned like Yakashonis. Like, I'm not worried about Yakashonis' shot at all. Like, he's shooting 33%, but he's taking like almost all of them on pull-ups. I'm not like, that's not one where I'm like particularly concerned. I think my answer here is probably Bird.
Okay.
Because all of the indicators are super positive on him. And he is like and look, I have Miles Bird, like, right around the 20 to 25 mark right now. Mm-hmm. So I'm probably higher on him than where a lot of people are. But I would say he's the one where, like, if you're talking about like mediocre shooter where it's high volume, but like not making a whole lot of them, frankly, I think as he gets stronger and like can repeat his mechanics more consistently, I think the mechanics actually look quite clean and he makes free throws. Like that looks like the easiest answer to me.
Yeah, that would be fun. I'd have to go through all of my scouts and notes to find like the players where I'm like, man, why doesn't he make more shots? I buy the mechanics. I'm obviously not gonna be able to do that on 100+ players while we record. That would be bad podcasting. But yeah, Bird is an interesting one because he's a good player. I still have him in my first round tier. I have him a little bit lower, but he's still in my first round tier.
Yeah. From Lillard 93, and I'll pull this up as we go. Who is the underrated older prospect with a Toumani Camara, Herb Jones type ceiling?
Interesting. Underrated older.
You're gonna have to answer this because I'm trying to pull it up on the screen right now while we go.
I was gonna say that. Underrated older player.
Yeah, so like older guy who is like a good defender,
older guy
who will be underdrafted kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I actually believe this, but like if you want an older player that's a really good defender that's putting up good offensive numbers right now, it's Micah Peavy at Georgetown.
Peavy is the name for me that like you can very easily sell yourself on here. And I do have PV in my top 60. Like I've kind of slid him up a little bit. Like really, really interesting player. He is an awesome defender.
Yeah.
Like he is a like truly like elite defender across the board. And my issue with him is I don't think I really buy the shot yet. And I also really don't buy the like decision making and passing at all. So like Herb and Toumani, like those guys were like pretty sharp players in terms of like moving the ball around the perimeter and, playing more of a role. Like Peavy is, and like Herb won SEC Player of the Year. Like, don't get me wrong, but like he did it while being the best defensive player in the league and like leading their offense and like playing like pseudo point from time to time. But
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go. No, go ahead.
I was going to ask about Cedric Coward coming off.
So this is the other guy. Yeah, I like Coward a good amount more than I like PV. Actually, I don't think Coward is this level on defense.
Yeah,
like Camara and Herb Jones, but I think he's a different player, and I think he is an NBA player.
And he has physical tools. Like I've actually watched him in person and like his length is ridiculous. Like I saw, at Eastern Washington and like when he was taking a ton of offensive usage, I wonder if this could be like, okay, take a little less offensive usage, has these crazy, has these physical tools with his length and all of that and athleticism where all of a sudden he gets into the NBA and it's like he really, really guards dudes.
I think that's very plausible. He needs to like It's interesting if he gets into like a real NBA, weight training thing,
Correct.
because I
Yeah.
feel like he still has some baby fat right now. He'd be interesting to me too. He has a chance. He's super long. You're 100% right there. And I do love him. Like I have him like in my like 40s, 30s, 40s if he ends up being in this draft. I mean, the guy who's a little bit different than this, I guess, for me that I really like is Max Shulga.
Okay. Yeah.
Elite shooter. I think he's an awesome defender for his size. He's just going to be small. I shouldn't say awesome. He's like a good college defender for his size. He's just a little bit small. Has some real ball skills, like can pass, can play make a little bit. Like there are Austin Reevesy traits here. He's just not as slithery like through his hips as Reeves is, like with the ball in his hand, to where like Austin is like a real creator. I don't think Shulga will ever be a real creator, but he is like a serious 40% 3-point shooter.
Yeah.
The last guy I'll bring up here is a guy that like I don't see anybody talking about, and I don't really get it. I think Elijah Martin at Florida is fucking awesome. Like I get it that you can look at the numbers and not be wildly impressed or whatever, but you could like very easily make a case to me that he is their most important player, even like ahead of Walter Clayton, because Elijah Martin, like, do you know what Florida finished last year in defensive rating according to KenPom?
I do not.
Yeah, they finished like 99th, I think. I'll pull it up while we're talking. Yeah, they finished 94th in adjusted defensive rating according to KenPom. Roster isn't that much different this year outside of him. And the way that he's come in and like completely changed what they're able to do in terms of like applying defensive pressure at the point of attack, having more athleticism along the perimeter. He is the reason, like he is the biggest reason that they have become a top 10 defense in college basketball. To me, like if I was voting on the award and I'm not, like I would probably have him as the SEC Defensive Player of the Year this year. I'll hear out Meshack from Tennessee as well. Honestly, if I'm like being real about it, I think Meshack is probably a little bit better defensively than he is, but Meshack, like it's hard to have him on the court at the end of the day because the offense is what it is. I think that like Elijah Martin, like his defensive game is so underrated. And oh, by the way, like I know he's shooting 35 from 3 this year. He is a career 36% 3-point shooter, almost 37 on 835 attempts. So he's like 6'2". He's a nuclear athlete. Like he is a sick athlete. And he really defends at the point of attack. Like that's the one that I really like, who's like way off the radar right now. And I don't totally get it.
Another name. What about Jameer Watkins at Florida State?
I don't know what he does on offense is my issue.
But just for the defense, right? Like
for the defense, yeah.
And then this guy doesn't fit the older player yet, but like Dalen Swain may be this a couple. I wonder if he ends up being this name a couple years from now. So
yeah, just not there right now in terms of like he's a sophomore, and I think he's even like a young sophomore if I remember correctly. But yeah, a good name though, nonetheless, like a quite good name. Okay. Next one here, let's go with who are the best shooters in this class from 3? So specifically like off-ball shooters with like movement, relocation, coming off screens, catch and shoots, like everything like that. Who are your 3 best off-ball shooters in this class?
I mean, we talked about Trey earlier. At this point, like he's solidified himself in there. Your guy Con is probably number 2, right?
Yeah.
I
think Trey and Con are the 2 guys likely to be taken in the first round that I trust most for this question.
Yeah. Listen, like have been a Liam McNeely guy for a long time. I know the 3-point percentage is, it's at 35. So maybe he doesn't hit this discussion. He is 86% from the free throw line. Connecticut runs these guys off screens and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So like, I still think he's really, really going to shoot it, but I would understand if somebody wanted to go with a different name, just specifically off how guys have shot the basketball this year.
Yeah, so I'll go two. I'll go one older, one younger.
Okay.
Isaiah Evans is
Sure.
definitely going to be a real shooter.
Yeah.
I don't know if he can do anything else yet,
So that's my
to be honest with you.
I haven't really considered him super strongly for this draft just because I assume the what else does he do questions are going to come in pretty strong, but obviously can really, really shoot it.
Yeah. You watch him off movement, they run him off all these crazy flares, and they run him off of real actions, and he's like a flamethrower from
Yep.
three. The other guy I'll bring up here is another guy that I just don't think can do anything else, really. At the NBA level, I just don't think Kobe Brea is going to be able to defend. I don't think he can dribble at a high level. I don't know what it is that he does, but purely in terms of off ball shooting and knockdown guy. I mean, do you know what Kobe Brea is shooting over the last 2 years between Dayton and Kentucky from three?
Probably 45, 46%. I know his Dayton numbers were something silly.
6 attempts per game, 47% from three.
Yeah. He's almost 50 at Dayton, right? Right below it or something.
He if we're being completely who is the best shooter in this class, forgetting all other skills and literally just saying who is the guy who is the best shooter, it is definitely Kobe Brea.
Yeah.
That guy is a flamethrower from three. And I'll bring up Shulga. Shulga's at 42% over the last 2 years. They run him off of all crazy movement and stuff like that. But I think this actually is a pretty decent shooting class, honestly, a pretty good one, honestly, comparatively.
I think some people would I've seen his name thrown around, Junie Mobley at Ohio State. Where are you
Sure.
at with him? He can really shoot it.
No chance he's in this class, but yeah.
Yeah.
That's the only reason I don't bring him up.
Sure.
I mean, look, Junie, I mean, an icon. We love Junie Mobley here, but yeah, it just I will be quite skeptical on him as a NBA player right at this specific moment.
What about Chaz Lanier, Tennessee? Can really shoot it.
Yeah, good name.
High
volume. Can really shoot it. High volume. Can do it off of a lot of different actions. There are shooters in this class. If you want to find shooters, you're going to be able to find them in this class for sure.
They may just struggle to do much else. Some of them, not all, some.
Yeah, let's see here. I'm trying to find some other good ones here. Let's see. The NBL prospects, where are you at with them? I'll just do this really quickly. Yeah, so I did the 2E draft guide profile last week. I'm intrigued. I think he's probably more of a second to me the more I watch him. Yeah. I think the defense is actually really underrated. He's very he can guard a lot of different roles. He can guard a lot of different player types. But it's 30 to 40 to me the more I watch him, as opposed to 20 to 30.
I'm at 42. So right.
Yeah,
right
the shooting is enough of a worry for me that I would want to probably take him there. And I think he probably will shoot directly off the catch, from the corners and stuff. It's just off of any sort of movement, relocation stuff. I think the mechanics break down a little bit. Henschel is probably next for me right now, or Rocco. It'd be one of the two. They're both two-way, long-term guys to me. Henschel, the defense is going to take a lot of work. He's fearless. I love that. I love that he's a creator off the bounce, just not ready physically yet for the NBA.
Struggles to navigate ball screens right now. It would be
and off ball screens.
Yeah.
For anybody that watched him in the series against Melbourne United against Chris Golding. Yeah. He did great in game 2, but games 1 and 3 were pretty rough. And then Rocco is just a pure project. 7'3". It's just going to take time. It's just how comfortable you are taking somebody that's probably not going to be able to play until year 3 in the NBA. And to me, I'm just I'm not someone that is enthused by that, but I understand people who are on some level, I guess. And then Malik Lewis, Ethan Almanza, like I just don't see them really as like draftable at this point. I thought Malik had a real shot if he could really improve the offense, but it just it hasn't happened enough this year with Southeast. And
going back to the question earlier, I don't think I don't know that he was like a real draft prospect last year, but like in terms of guys that I had pretty high on my board to start this cycle, like I thought Malik Lewis might have like into the first round potential. Like I thought he'd go down and play really well, and the defense and all of that. And it just, he's fallen completely off my board. And I was never an Ethan Almanza guy, but I didn't think he would completely fall off the way we saw this year. So,
yeah. Okay. You said in a recent mock that Ryan Kalkbrenner's range is 25 to 40-ish. How much would you say he's helped himself this season, and how does he stack up against other bigs that he'd be competing with in that range? Yeah, I mean, like I think Kalkbrenner's helped himself this year for sure. Just the consistent dominance, even though like he doesn't have real guards next to him this year. Like all due respect to Stephen Ashworth, but like Ashworth is more of like a scorer shooter. Yeah. As opposed to like a real play. I guess that like Ashworth has gotten better in like the primary playmaking stuff this year, but I don't feel great about it. Like, even though I know he's leading the Big East in assists, but a lot of that just feels like Creighton's offense and like the scheme and structure of the offense, where he's like able to find these assists as opposed to, like really manipulating defenders and like making plays. And he's like very turnover prone for Creighton as well. Losing, Pop Isaacs 8 games into the year, like you lose a guard there who can really play and like, or at least can like, create his own shot and is comfortable shooting. They just don't have many other guards is the issue. Like Neal is there, and like Neal is, I don't even know like what you would call him. He's almost more of like a point forward-ish kind of vibe as opposed to a like true like playmaking guard. So I say all this to say that like Kalkbrenner to me has proven that like this year he's almost like scheme agnostic, right? In terms of the offense, like he'll just make it work. He's improved the shot. Like I think there's some pick and pop potential or trailer potential as a 3. There's a 3-point shooter. The defense is just what it is. He's one of the most dominant defenders in college basketball. I would be, completely comfortable with him in a drop coverage scheme in the NBA right now. Yeah, like to me, Kalkbrenner has helped himself quite a bit. How does he compare to guys like, who's he competing with? Like Danny Wolf, Janai Broom, trying to think of like, Alex Condon, Rocco Zikarsky. It's just, scheme. Yeah. It's all going to be about scheme. Like who wants more of a drop big? Like do the Bucks prefer him over Alex Condon because of the like potential in drop coverage, particularly? Sure. Or do they prefer, Janai Broom? Would you rather have like Condon or Kalkbrenner's true size at like 7'1" with real length? Or would you rather have Janai Broom, who's like more of like a physical ass kicker like type? Yeah. It's just going to be scheme dependent. Honestly, it's not, it's not a one size fits all situation with these bigs.
Yeah. I mean, I have him in a similar range. I probably have him a little bit lower. I have Kalkbrenner more as like a solid second round pick. Mid second, but it's similar names, right? And I think when you get into the second round, it really becomes that like, okay, if you're wanting to get out and hard hedge and play at the level and blitz and Kalkbrenner's probably not your guy. You probably want to go with somebody with a little bit more scheme versatility on the defensive end. But if you're a true drop coverage team, then yeah, he makes more sense than some of the other names we've talked about. So I think he's interesting. I think he has done, to your point, I think he's done well for himself this year. I think for me, he's a second round pick. I think that's where he probably ends up going. But as we've talked about, who knows what's going to happen with NIL, guys going back, especially in the range we're talking about right now. And all of a sudden he could end up, as one of the better bigs at the end of the first round and not just top of the second or mid second.
Yeah, no, that's right. From James Plowright, who is most likely to be this year's late draft process riser, like Tidjon Solon was last season? Yeah, this probably feels like more of a question for me than you. I mean, Behringer was a good name for this until John like spiked him way up the board. And I still think Behringer ends up is like 15 to 25, 15 to 30. I think I would bet that he goes in the first, but and like the more I watch him, the more I understand why. The issue with him is like he's not like 7 foot. He's like 6'10 ish. Like he's not a monster, but he catches everything. Like that dude catches absolutely everything on the interior. His hands are unbelievable. So I mean, like maybe he spikes up. I don't know that I see anybody like spiking all the way up to 6 like Salon did last year. There's no. I wouldn't argue that there's like a secret Euro prospect this year.
So that was what I say. Is it more likely that it's a Euro prospect like Bilal and then Tinjan, or is it more likely it's somebody goes on a crazy like Cam Jones goes on a crazy tournament run, or Phylon goes on a crazy tournament run, or
Maybe
something like that? Like, is this the year it's the either young or old prospect who goes crazy through the conference tournament, NCAA tournament, and that gets him into the lottery top 10?
But that wouldn't be like a late process riser. Like that would be like a March and April riser. You know what I mean?
We're talking about like the pre-draft process type time.
Yeah.
Frame. So there's a guy that we think will wow teams in workouts.
I mean, like Carter Bryant's enormous, but like I don't know if he has the ball skill yet to like really, skyrocket. I mean, like people are going to be mad at this answer, but if you told me like Jaeger just went into workouts and like with the increased space, like really skyrocketed up, maybe Hugo Gonzalez is a good answer here. Like that's plausible to me.
He would be interesting because he would be if you told me, hey, Bryce, we'll let you go watch workouts for 3 players from this draft to get a better feel, he would be one of the names just because I don't feel like I have a great feel for him because of like the amount of time I've actually been able to watch him play. And yeah, there's a lot of games of like 6-7 minutes, but I want to be able to watch him for 20. So if my opportunity was then to go watch him in workouts and stuff like that, like he would be one that I could see like people rising up once you start to get the intel and stuff like that from workouts. That's a good name. I like that name.
Yeah, and like all the intel on Hugo is like very, very positive.
Yeah,
like
I didn't mean intel. I guess I should have said just like workouts, how he plays, and what we hear coming out of those things.
Yeah. Huh. I don't know that I see that guy this year, even though we've had, I mean, like, honestly, this is the player. The player is Essen Gay. If he comes in and like really like, goes nuts in these workouts, it probably is Essen Gay. But I just like, I don't like the tape like at all, really. Like I don't know. Like team saw him in Portland and he dropped like 22 points in that game against the Blazers and still like came away, like just okay on it. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like they were blown away. So, I mean, Noah is probably the right answer if we're being honest. Like, I think it is the correct. If somebody's gonna skyrocket, we have measurements for Essen Gay at like 6'9" with like a 6'11" wingspan, but then also like a 9'3" standing reach. So the people that have seen him over in Europe have told me, like, don't expect the 6'11" wingspan, basically. Like, expect it to be longer. He just looks way longer than that. So I'm guessing that either the wingspan or the standing reach is wrong from Basketball Without Borders last year. Or got mixed up somehow in some way. And Mr. Ray asks, are foreign guys always going to be the answer to this? And honestly, the answer is kind of yes, because those guys are still playing overseas and like continuing to build a like tape and continuing to build like a reel of play, right? So it is almost always going to be European guys at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Where this happens. Okay, last couple here, and we're just going to kind of zoom through. These won't be draft anymore. The Raptors' current collection of player personnel are a visibly questionable fit. Are they getting ready to star hunt? I just like I don't know what the Raptors are doing. I'm not going to sit here and like speculate. I think that they probably, I mean, maybe they could use this pick to like star hunt and like see if they could go get somebody, but I think they're just like still trying to figure out exactly what Scotty Barnes is. Is he like a low level all-star or is he like a top 10 guy? I think they probably think he's a top 10 guy. I don't agree with that, but you know, I think he's going to be a really, really good high level player that probably makes another all-star game or two at some point. Yeah, it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see kind of how they handle it. Like, are they going to, I don't think it's this summer that they're going star hunting. Yeah. I think it's like in the future they're going star hunting.
Yeah, my guess is we see how this works out, you know, and we've talked about the Quickly, Barrett, Barnes, Brandon Ingram quartet and how that's going to look and, you know, how they'll fit together and all of that. My guess is that's how next year starts for Toronto, though, with Jakob Poeltl, and then you have the young guys coming off the bench and all of that. And then you go from there. And again, like we talked about this a little bit earlier, what can you star hunt with those contracts? And maybe you can. Maybe Masai will figure it out. But my guess is it's not this summer as well. I assume they see how this plays out with this roster they've put together.
What do you think Jared McCain's ceiling is?
I don't know. A really good off-ball guard that's can he be a third option, offensive option on a team? Can he be that third guy? I would say that's the ceiling where I feel like it probably hits with him.
Yeah, I think I'd go even a little bit higher than that.
Is that underselling him a little bit?
Yeah, I think I'd probably go a little bit higher with the ceiling just based off what we saw this year. Yeah, like if it really breaks right, where like he can be your number 2 scoring option, maybe like on a really great team, but like maybe your third best like player overall if you're on like a really, really good team, right? Like the 76ers, you know, kind of want to be here moving forward. I'm trying to think like any other like looking through questions here that have maybe been asked on YouTube. Let's see here. Do we have any others? Did anybody ask anything? Why isn't Daryl Morey getting more heat? Lots of mistakes building up. I don't know. I feel like he's definitely getting heat in Philly. If you like kind of look at any of those things that come out of Philly, man, like I feel like the regular folks in Philly that do like the radio shows and stuff, Daryl also got a little bit lucky with the Eagles winning the Super Bowl. Sorry, Bryce. But like, I think there'd be like a crazy, crazy amount of heat on him.
I think it probably starts next year. I think it's already started. I think we've all talked about this. And I mean, we've talked about it multiple times with the situation they're in. We've also talked about these guys coming back healthy next year and being the big 3 in the roster that could make sense and they make a jump back to being competitive. I think if it all goes south again next year, I think you'll really start to hear. I didn't think about the Eagles thing, maybe because I've tried to block all of that out, but yeah, Philly has a lot to celebrate right now.
Favorite fits for Portland, assuming they are picking number 11.
Rasheer Fleming.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, like if Connor or Liam McNeely fell there, I think that this is a good call from Runner Dude. Rasheer Fleming is kind of interesting there. I think I see him more as like a 4-5 as opposed to like a 3-4, which I think some people do. I don't know where you fall on that.
I see him more as like a true 4, like a real kind of just forward, where with his length, and if he gets a little bit stronger, I could see where people would see him being able to play some 5. But yeah, like I just see him like as a true 4. Like if some players you have to be like this distinction of 4-5, 4-3, 3-4. Rasheer Fleming, I just think is a true 4 forward, like slides right into that spot that Jeremy Grant, which would be interesting, right, for Portland with Toumani. But anyway, like I also think Rasheer Fleming actually shoots the ball. Like I don't question the jumper with Rasheer the way some people still do.
I mean, like Murray Boyles would make sense for them too if he was to fall to 11. I don't know if he'll fall to 11. Is kind of where I'm at on him, but he's a polarizing prospect because it's kind of an awkward profile. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does Jace Richardson have some Mike Conley, Kyle Lowry outcomes? Lowry's an interesting one, just kind of given the like physical frame, right? Like, thicker dude who's not like a crazy athlete or anything. It's not bad. I kind of like that. I can see a world where that comes, but here's the thing on Jason, why I think like everyone's all over the map on him. I think the ceiling is super high. I think the floor is quite low. Like he has a wider range of outcomes to me than almost anybody in this class is where I'm at. But I think the ceiling like is very, very high if it goes right in terms of his development. So like every time I see him on the ball, I'm just like very, very, very impressed. Like if you look at his last little group of games here, where he's been like outstanding, playing more consistently on the ball, getting more reps to do that. In his last 7 games, he's averaging like 14 points and, has like a 4-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, but never passes really. But he also doesn't make mistakes. Like he's a really tricky player to me to evaluate this year. I love the potential and I love the upside, but I can see where a lot of it goes wrong too, just because he's not a crazy athlete and he is, 6'1.5", 6'2" probably in terms of what he comes in at.
Yeah, no, I mean he's an interesting player because of he can shoot it as well. I like his defense, the way he navigates screens, stuff like that. So yeah, I'm interested to watch him down the stretch. Like you said, as he continues. There's some of these guys where I know, you don't want to over inventory the March Madness and conference tournaments, but there's some guys where you just want to continue to get more data, and that stuff is really good data. I think he is definitely one of those. Like I feel like I know what I need to know about Cooper Flagg. I don't need to watch Cooper Flagg. I will, but I don't need to. Jace is one of those players I am really interested to watch through the conference tournament in March Madness, just to get more data and feel stronger in my evaluation and how right or wrong it is.
Let's see here. What are your thoughts on Alex Condon? I think he should probably go back, if I'm being honest. I know that he had like the monster game against Alabama last night. I don't think he's like a real shooter is my thing. Like I'm not totally convinced of that yet. I know that people like look at the shooting potential and see a lot of exciting outcomes there, but he's like very, very inconsistent from game to game. Like he was like just absolutely obliterated Grant Nelson last night, like off the court. But then like against Georgia, I didn't think he was super impressive. Against Tennessee, I didn't think he was super impressive. I thought South Carolina kind of gave him some fits here and there. And that was like a super tight game as well. Like the Kentucky game that he played earlier this year, I watched that, like was okay, like offensively, like there just wasn't a lot of juice there, it felt like in that game. I think he should probably go back. I don't really see I've not really talked to anybody in the league that has him like as a, this is a first round pick, like we love him, situation. I've talked to some teams that like want to get him into workouts and like think he could rise into that range for sure. But I haven't talked to anybody that's like, yeah, this is like the exact thing that makes sense right now for him to like, he should definitely be in this draft.
I mean, he plays extremely hard. That's the one thing I always notice with Condon.
Always.
Right from the start.
Yep.
I will say, I think one thing that really showed out in that Bama game last night was his athleticism. Like, he caught some lobs that were like, okay, this is, the body control. He had a really impressive one actually where he didn't dunk it, but he just caught it with two hands, kept his eyes, was able to finish through that contact. Like, he gets fun, like, post position, like he'll run out in transition and then seal his guy high and stuff like that. So he does a lot of really interesting things. He had some really good rim protection as well. He'll attack rebounds, offensive boards, all of that. I'm with you. I think the one thing NBA teams will probably wonder or want an answer to is what exactly is the the other thing is I think he's a really good passer too. Like, I probably should have led with that along with playing really hard. He's really good in their system for sure, throwing these like DHO backdoors and stuff like that. And the assist numbers don't always show it. He hit 2 or 3 last night that were hockey assists because he hits Clayton, forces help. Clayton dumps it off to another Florida big who then finishes. So lots of really interesting tools and everything he does. I am just interested to find out from NBA teams, do they think the offensive package is enough, or does he really need to shoot it, or does he really need something else? Like, where are they at with that stuff?
Well, and then you like account for the defense, and he plays super hard, but like not super long.
Yeah.
I don't think you can really play him in drop in the NBA like super effectively, right? Like it's going to have to be like more of like a show and recover, and he's smart and he plays super hard. And I think that like, or at least, not show and recover, but like you play him like more at the level and try and recover. Like there's a lot I want to learn more about Condon right now. He has a shot to go in the first round, I would say, but I think of him more as like a 40 to 50 guy.
And to your point, or the question earlier about Kalkbrenner, if you're a team that like wants to play at the level, wants to hard hedge and get like the Nets do this a lot with Day'Ron Sharpe, actually. Like, as I've watched some Nets games recently, like they'll play those guys really high, and Condon is the perfect player to do those things, maybe more than a Ryan Kalkbrenner. If you're the Brooklyn Nets, like you bring Condon in and he will do those things. And so it really comes down to your scheme for your team, because I am kind of with you that I don't know that he has this crazy length and bounce, even though I said he showed up a little bit in Bama, to like play true drop. Like, I think eventually in true drop, he's just going to like, it's going to be a little bit tough for him. So that's where he's interesting. And he's not the only guy in this range that would have those same conversations about.
Yeah, and 2 final things here. I think Condon's like definitely an NBA player, to be clear.
Sure.
Like at some point, he's like at least a backup center in the NBA. The second thing here is like, I keep getting asked by people around like Australian football. Oh, like, what's going to happen with him? Like, is he going to, because he's currently on a roster for Collingwood, who is an Australian football team. Guys, like Alex Condon's not coming back to football like anytime soon. It would have to like really go wrong for him in basketball to make it anywhere near financially viable for him to go back to Australian football. Like it's like, no. Like, I've had people like ask me, like, is he going to come back like next year to play Australian football? Absolutely not. Like absolutely not next year. It does not matter if he's a first round pick, a second round pick, or if he's going back to Florida. Like, if he goes back to Florida, he's making $1 million USD, and that is more than I think any Australian football player currently makes right now. If it's not, it's like very close. So, guys, like not happening. Like,
I will
not.
With him. I find myself, I'm with you. He's an NBA player, and I'm interested to see what NBA teams will think about him this year. I find myself wondering, like, what if he went back to Florida and shot it? Like, what if he knocked down,
be a top 20 pick next year for sure.
Like, what if he shot 38% from 3 on even 2.5 or 3 attempts, along with everything else we've outlined? Because then there are like those offensive questions are like, no, we can see this. He's going to pick and pop. You want to close out. Now he can put it on the deck. He can pass a little bit. We can run him DHO, like all sorts, trail threes. And it just, I find myself wondering about that. Like, what if, or if a team looks at him right now, like you said, and they say, no, like, we think he's going to shoot it. We'll draft him now and just know that it's going to take him an extra year to develop that. But we want him to do it with us under our team control as opposed to taking a chance. So I could definitely see a team, going that way, especially if he goes into workouts and performs well, and I think he will because he plays so hard and does so many good things. I think he will do well in workouts.
All right. There were two more that I wanted to get to, and I have to find them. Okay. Where are they? Let's see here. Here, I'll just ask. I'll put this one up on the board while I find them, and you can discuss this while I find these other two questions here. If the Spurs add Naz Reid in a top 4 lottery pick this offseason, are they a top 3 seed contender next year, presuming Wemby is healthy? So in terms of the top 4 seed potential right now, because they have 9 and 11, essentially, I believe that Hawks pick is unprotected. They basically have like a 30% chance to move up into the top 4. It's like in that ballpark. But then Naz Reid, like, I don't think they have quite as much space as that. Like, I think they would have to clear some money off their books and like convince somebody to take like a Barnes or a Keldon Johnson or somebody like that. But they could, in theory, clear money. But if they did that and they had Naz Reid and, you know, one of these top 4 guys, what are your thoughts on their ceiling for next year, Bryce?
So I'm assuming this is top 3 seed. I mean, like, I still wouldn't put them over the Thunder going into the season. I think it would depend on what the Lakers do. And LeBron, obviously, a year older. You still have the Nuggets. Like, I think some of the teams that I would still put above them, like, I could understand the arguments because, like, even like the Warriors, who we've seen be really successful since the trade, like, that's still a year older of Butler, Draymond, and Curry. I don't think I probably would going into the season. I understand the argument here, but I don't think I would. I don't think I would feel comfortable doing that going into the season. My other thing is, like, if the top 4 pick's not Cooper, I don't know how much I think Ace Bailey is going to come in and just like change the trajectory of a team in the West. Even Dillon, I don't know, especially on the Spurs with Fox and Castle already there. So, like, I don't know that the top 4 pick changes this calculation for me next season. So it's really just adding Naz, which is a huge addition. Like, Naz would be a lot of fun there. I don't know that vaults it all the way into the top 3 for me. Plus, like,
and they got to have them as a playoff team if they did this.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, that gets you a really interesting 3, a year older of Castle, like all of that. Like the other, like, I've watched this play out this year with Asar Thompson. He just got off his minutes restriction. And I'm not saying it's a 1-to-1 with whatever Wemby's going through and what Asar went to. I'm just saying, like, I know the question asked fully healthy. I just don't know that we see like a how many ever minutes per game from Victor, like, right off the bat next season as well. But yeah, playoff team for sure. Like, because I think Naz is really good, and that would be a fun offense with the way those guys can space the floor and De'Aaron attacking, and sure.
From Brian Kervick, with revenue sharing coming in for college basketball, are you hearing any talk of guys who are fringe first rounders more likely to head back to school? It seems like NIL contracts will be going up substantially again. So, yes. This is a real factor.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would say like borderline first. Look, like I've written this, so like I'm comfortable saying it here. Like, Thomas Sorber is a guy that, like, I've been told, you know, could go either way.
Sure.
Right. I don't know how much that has to do with NIL necessarily and like money, but I'm sure that's a piece of it. You know what I mean? Plus his injury at this point as well. Like, that's a real factor. I mean, yeah, like the money is a real factor. And here's the reason why. Like, when you talk to folks around college basketball right now, there's the NIL side, and then there's going to be the rev share coming in.
Yeah.
You know, the rev share, most of that money is going to go to football if you're a football school, right? That's just the reality of the equation. It's capped at 20 million, like somewhere like Ohio State, I'm sure is going to get 20 million. But like, they're not going to put, 7 million of that toward college basketball. They're going to put a large majority of that toward, football, because they should, right? So there are a couple things kind of happening here. So first, The football schools will get some money, like for sure. They're going to get like a couple of $1 million each, I would guess, is kind of the current projection to add on top of their NIL situations. Then there are also the non-football schools, the schools like Georgetown, Xavier, Creighton, even like the A10 schools.
Yeah.
Like George Washington and Dayton and St. Louis and places like that. Like those schools are going to have a lot more money to spend than what they've ever had before within college basketball. Is currently like, and look, all of this could change. Like, let's be very clear about this. This is the Wild West. I'm just going off of what coaches tell me now and where things seem like they're headed as the transfer portal opens in a couple of weeks, right? Which is terrifying to me in my brain that I have to start doing transfer portal profiles in like 3 weeks. But as of right now, the assumption is that there's going to be a whole lot more money in the marketplace, essentially, like a substantial amount more money in the marketplace. Like if there were only a few $1 million players this year within college basketball, there are going to be a lot of $1 million players within college basketball next season. Not like in exorbitant, like we're not talking like every team is going to have $1 million player. Like that's not, I don't think that's real, but there are going to be a lot of them like out there this cycle. So yes, absolutely. There are going to be guys, and to me, it's more the second rounders and the guys who, in any way, if there's any risk they could end up on a two-way, these guys, I think, will almost certainly go back. Like, you know, these are speculative numbers. Like Milos Uzan, with the way he has played down the stretch for Houston here, is definitely $1 million player in college basketball next season. The two-way contract in the NBA is like $600,000.
Yep.
Right? It's more financially viable for him to stay in school than be on a two-way. Now, he could play himself up into being, and I would absolutely suggest that Uzan tests, but like he could play himself up into being a, you know, first round pick, guarantee contract guy in the late second or in the early second round, something like that. Right? But if there's any risk of him or Tahad Pettiford or, you know, Alex Condon or, you know, I'm like trying to think of other players like Isaiah Evans, like any of these guys, like I can keep naming names. If there's any risk that these guys are going to be on a two-way next year, they should go back to school.
Yeah.
Because there's just going to be more money there for them than what it will be on a two-way. And the money will probably be pretty damn close in most cases to what will be there for their first year on a guaranteed NBA contract. Now, the good news on going to the NBA is that you start your clock, which means you hit free agency sooner, which means in the long run, you're going to make more money. It's why like the Cooper Flag thing is driving me out of my mind. Cooper Flag is not going back to Duke, guys, because Cooper Flag, yes, let's even play the game and go crazy and say Duke could somehow find $10 million in NIL money to keep Cooper Flag at Duke. Let's just like, you know, for a second, play that game, which I've not heard of any player getting 10, but let's play the game for a second. Cooper in the long run would still be costing himself probably $20 to $30 million by not hitting free agency the year sooner that he would hit free agency by entering the NBA this year as opposed to next year. Now, if I was Cooper and I was CAA, if there was a specific spot that I didn't want to land, like let's say that, you know, he doesn't want to go to Charlotte or something like that for whatever reason. And I'm not saying this is true. I'm just throwing this out there, right? If there is a spot he doesn't want to land, I probably might try to play that lever here because he would have, after the lottery, like 2 weeks to be able to try and play that lever. And if you're Charlotte, you probably just call the bluff, right? Or, I'm saying Charlotte, but this isn't a shot at Charlotte. Like, I've given that front office and ownership group a lot of compliments here already in this show. But like, let's say it's whoever, right? If he doesn't want to go live in Canada or something like that, I might try and pull that lever and like make the team call the bluff over like the 2 week window that like he could in theory. And maybe it would be worthwhile to him to take a risk that next year maybe Charlotte or Washington doesn't get the number 1 overall pick. And I still think he would go number 1 overall next year for what it's worth. I think he's a better prospect than Peterson and Boozer and Devanza and those guys. But maybe he's willing to play that game and play that risk and see, and it's worth 25 to 30 million dollars or whatever for him. But I don't see that. I find that to be an incredibly, remarkably unlikely outcome.
Yeah. No, that's the NIL has definitely changed things. Like you said, whenever these guys can go back and they can make more money on their NIL or as much as a 2-way contract, and then a lot of them will look at it as, hey, we can go back. I can improve my stock. I think a lot of them think that, they bet on themselves. These are confident kids, as they should be. You don't get to where they are by not being confident. And I do think, in some regards, the NBA, they're still with the draft, like the young player versus old player. But I think, being an old player doesn't just crush your stock the way, I don't think people talk about it the same way they used to. And so, yeah, if you, it's not always easy to get a guaranteed first round pick, right? If you're in that later first, early second situation. And so, again, it comes down to that risk reward scenario. And if you don't feel like you have a guarantee, and like you said, there's a chance that you don't go in the first, a team tells you, hey, you're number 2 on our books. If this guy's off, we're taking you. Do you really want to play those odds? And it potentially end up on a 2-way. So, yeah, it's absolutely a factor.
Yeah. And in the Cooper thing, like it's just like completely insane to me. Like I would be completely staggered if he decided to stay in school. Like it'd blow my mind. I don't see it unless like a team that he desperately does not want to go to, which I have not heard or seen any evidence of that at this point. Yeah, it would just be like completely insane to me. I don't see it in any way, shape, or form. Okay, final question here, Bryce. Let's see here. What are some tips getting started as a scout? How to do it as well as how to get your foot in the door professionally? Bryce, do you have any thoughts here?
Yeah, so this is, I mean, obviously I haven't made it to that point yet. I get to do a little bit of stuff outside the media realm. I will just lay out my path, which started obviously on the media side. And it sounds really simple and basic, but I found my niche and I worked really, really hard at it. And I stayed in my lane, Sam. Like I figured out early on that video breakdowns were stuff that I was pretty good at. And I just stayed with that. I didn't try to do anything outside of that. And I just put out good content, and I handled the content that got 1 like and 1 retweet the same way I handled the ones that blew up. And that's where it can get discouraging is, excuse me, I feel like I've put out some really good content that people probably haven't seen. And I'm like, man, this one should have blown up, but eventually people see good work. And the other thing I always say, I did this just the other day. I went on a podcast, I got followed by somebody, and I just took the opportunity to reach out to that person. And I said like, hey, just wanted to introduce myself. If you ever need anything, let me know. If you have any advice, I would love to have it. They haven't responded, but listen, I never have questioned or felt bad or regretted reaching out to people. And relationships that I never thought would end up providing opportunities, this podcast being one of them. The way this came about was never the path I thought it would take to get here. And so I would say take advantage of every single relationship and make it a real relationship. Like I mentioned earlier with me and Sam, we don't just talk basketball and that's it. We have a real relationship about life outside of this. but
Yeah.
take advantage of every opportunity and relationship because you never know what may come of it.
Yeah, like I'm not big on transactional relationships. That's just like not how I do my business. So yeah, like in terms of like the actual scouting piece of it, like I really just like tried to like learn as much as I could early on. Like I
Yeah.
really like tried to dig in terms of like the mechanics. The thing that I really learn and like really tried to learn early on are like the context of what specific like teams are trying to do,
Sure.
the sets, like how the context around players changes the way that they're able to play. Even it's why like I've been much happier and much more willing to give Cade like a pass early on. And it's why like to me, like when we talk about LaMelo, it's just like, well, okay, like some of this is like self-inflicted undeniably, but also some of it is the context, like he's playing with bad players and everything, right? So or playing with like difficult players to evaluate him within the context of. So I say all of this to say like I found it interesting just to like really understand the context of what teams are running and like really learn that. Like I want to know, okay, so when Purdue like runs a rip screen here, is Miles Colvin supposed to do this? Or is Braden Smith making an error with his read? Is with Houston, like they're trying to run like a zoom action. Okay, what is the middle screener doing? What is the roller at the top with the DHO doing? Like I want to know like all of that kind of ins and outs of what's going on before like I really try and dig in. But you learn that as you dig in too. um like don't be afraid to look at numbers in terms of who you should look at, right? I think people understand that like I use analytics for sure. I absolutely think they're incredibly valuable. I think they're incredibly valuable as an identification tool more than anything, as opposed to a like this is what this is from a value perspective tool, right? Like I want to use the numbers to say, okay, like this player, like Bennett Sturts, is like going nuts in terms of like the models right now, right? Okay, let's take a look at Bennett Sturts and see what's going on at Drake and see what's happening. Okay, so Ben McCollum is like maybe the best coach in the country. You're one of the top 10, let's call him. In terms of offensive scheme, he's just like fucking brilliant. I love everything that they do there. I have skepticism that Bennett Sturts is going to be able to separate at the NBA level, right? But within this scheme, he's pretty fucking amazing.
Yeah.
And I want to, see what that looks like. And I might be willing to take a shot on him contextually, like as a two-way or like maybe in the second round or something if he's in this class. But like, so I personally knew who Ben McCollum was coming up from, what is it, Northwest Missouri. So I have always been really interested in him. But some of these other coaches that come up, like I might not have known that, and thus the analytics and the models may have given me a reason to watch somebody like Bennett Sturts, right? So don't be afraid to use the numbers, but like, you also really have to do the work on the back end as much as anything. You really have to scout and evaluate and figure out what's going on. The final thing I'll say is just like the background intel is so critical. Like if there's somebody that I have ranked lower than other people do, there's a good shot that there's something going on that I've been told. I might just not like the player. That's entirely possible. I think longtime listeners of the show probably understand where my preferences are in player type and like what I tend to value versus overvalue and undervalue. But like if there's somebody that the information doesn't track with, it's typically that there's something I've been told going on that like I don't want to report because I don't want to like crush the kid or something like that.
I think I want to emphasize what you talked about with understanding what people, teams, actions are trying to get on both ends of the floor. I think that was one of the hardest things for me. I played college basketball 20 years ago, Sam. I
Yeah.
played in the Patriot League. We played at one of the slowest paces in the country. And that's all I knew college basketball wise. Obviously, never came close to a professional league. And then I went and coached high school basketball for 10 years before I started doing this. And so my perception of basketball wasn't wrong. It was just different, especially with the NBA.
Totally.
So it took me a while to catch up to what does the NBA want? What works in the NBA? What is valuable? What is not? And all of that. So get to know those things in terms of, and even the difference between the NBA and college and what NBA teams are wanting compared. Like sometimes I think people get mad at it's like, well, this guy does all of this stuff in college. It's like, yeah, but for his archetype for what he's going to be in the NBA, does he do what NBA teams will value? Even if NBA teams are wrong, I tell people this all the time. It doesn't matter what I think this player is or what. All that matters is what 30 NBA teams think about a player, because ultimately they make the decisions on these things. And if 30 NBA teams don't think that so-and-so can be an NBA player because he can't shoot, then that's all that matters because they make the decisions. But get to know the games and what is being valued. And that's constantly changing, right? The game is, as much as people want to say it's
Totally
30 teams playing the same way, which is ridiculous, the game is always evolving and changing. And so try to stay up with those things. And that's one of the biggest things I had to learn when I started doing this, because I undervalued players because I didn't value what they did. But again, doesn't matter what I value. It's what NBA teams in the NBA game values.
I'll say this too, like, you don't want to get bogged down in groupthink. And like, I think that we do a good job of not doing that here. Like I have different opinions all the time, compared to what the consensus is, but there is like value in like what like a crowdsource model says a lot of the time in the like I disagree with NBA teams on certain players regularly. Like for instance, like I've been trying to convince teams like that I talk to that I think Christian Doolittle in Perth is like a really interesting player for an NBA team. Right. And, when I talk to them, like they'll ask me, yeah, like, is there anybody in like Australia that you're kind of interested in that you think, might end up being an NBA player? And I'll say Christian Doolittle, like he's a fantastic defender. The shot has improved. He's like a real, like he can't really pass on the move and like, make those high level reads or anything, but like there's a lot there that I think he can really play, like you can play with. And, like NBA teams have, been hit or miss on it. Like some are interested, some aren't, is what it is. Right. But there is value to me in, 30 teams saying, no, this guy isn't very good. You know what I mean? Like this guy isn't a first round pick. This guy isn't that. Like, it does say something at the end of the day. And sometimes that's like, okay, maybe there is something off the court that I didn't get. Like maybe there is something in terms of like the injury history that I didn't get. Right. There is like real value in that. The public sphere, like I'm hit or miss on sometimes. There are a lot of smart people, and I have people that I enjoy looking at and like seeing things from. But there are like a lot of people I think that don't really hit the context and value the numbers at a level to which I'm uncomfortable with, in terms of just like purely projecting based off of those, as opposed to really sitting down, doing the tape, like really digging in. And like, I'm not taking shots at those people. Like I'm exceptionally lucky insofar as like I get to do this professionally. So I have the time to like really sit in and dig into this tape. Like that is like, I'm very privileged in that regard to where I get to do this professionally and like be able to dig in. But that's also why I work really hard at it. Like, because of that, like, I don't want that to go away. So kind of a lot there, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's one thing is like you're gonna have to work if you want to in. You're gonna have to work really, really hard. Like it is a lot of work, and you truly find out if you love basketball or not, because it's a lot of sitting in front of you watch a lot of basketball over and over and over, and whatever your form of note taking is, you're doing that while you do it, and clipping stuff out and saving it and all of it. Like, the other thing I'll say is be organized. I would really struggle on this podcast if I didn't have all of the notes that Sam, you've seen it. I used to put it into our outlines. I don't do it anymore, but I would be lost if I didn't have all
what outlines, Bryce?
Yeah, we're professionals. We don't need those anymore. But
no. This is where, so for what it's worth, I've gotten way better at this now. Like,
we're on different ends of this one.
Yeah, I'm like pure fucking chaos half the time. Just the ADHD
How
brain.
many tabs do you have open right now?
2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, it looks like. And how many of them actually need to be open? So like I have 3 email accounts, right? So like I constantly keep 3 email tabs open, but I rarely look at them. Maybe I should change that. Maybe that would stop me from looking at my emails as consistently as I do. I have both Blue Sky and Twitter open because I've been pulling from there for the show. I've a couple of YouTube videos that I've been watching while I watch tape. Not like watching, but like listening to while I'm like just watching tape. I'm like constantly on the lookout for like random shit I can listen to that isn't like basketball related. Like it's a wild ride. Let's see. I have 1 Synergy tab open, but that was to look up Jalen Duren stuff from the show earlier. I have Ken Palm open, which like isn't necessary. I have like 5 or 6 unnecessary tabs open.
I have 1 now. I had a few more earlier, but when I no longer need it, see, Google put this little button there. There's an X that you can click.
Yeah, I know.
And then you leave that tab when you no longer need it. And I take quite good use of that little X.
Yeah, I need to get better at that. Like I had a tab. I had an A24, which is a studio that sells Blu-rays open. I had an A24 tab open for a month on my computer.
Oh, no.
Basically, like, yeah, at some point I'm gonna buy these Blu-rays, and I just might as well leave it open.
That stresses me out. That stresses me out.
Oh my god. Okay, that's the last question here. I'm trying to think if there's any other random things I have on scouting. Getting to know as many people as you can is really critical within this too.
Yep.
Yeah. Getting to know as many people as you
Build
can.
Build real relationships and never turn one down.
I think that's absolutely. But look, like, so yes, build real relationships. That's absolutely true. What I will say though is like, I personally, like the way that I do my business, and I've told you this, I've told Andrew this, is like, I just don't work with shitheads.
Sure.
And like, and I actually mean that even like when I'm like working in terms of like sourcing and like getting information and things, like I'm good. Like if I don't really fuck with you, like I don't need to talk to you. Like there are a few agents where like I'm just good. Like I don't, I'm okay.
There's enough good people to get done what you need to get done.
There are enough good people in basketball to where I can get the information I need from a lot of different ways. And I just am not going to work with bad people. Like that's kind of the reality.
Yep.
Okay. Bryce, that's a 3-hour mailbag. I hope that we answered as many questions as we possibly could here. We did want to do like a massive mailbag because we get asked to do it like all the time. I don't know about you. Like, do you feel that way? I feel like people ask us to do this so regularly.
Yeah, like for me, and probably not as directly, but I feel like people are always sending us questions, and like I've gotten a bad habit not responding as much on Twitter because I can't get into Nuance or Blue Sky. So I felt like it was necessary to like let people get those questions out, and then let's hash them all out on a podcast.
That's right. Like it's just really, really, you got to find the time to do one of these things, and this was like a really good window. I felt like to do it. This weekend I'm gonna like sit down and like really hammer out like a podcast schedule through the end of the regular season, at least in terms of like where we are, because I'm traveling over to the US, as you know, like in a month or so
Mhm.
for some things. So, you know, tricky to, we need to like just make sure we're scheduling around each other and making sure that we're in a good spot. Anything else? I don't think so. I think we're good. Bryce, tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people what's going on.
Yeah, at Motor City Hoops on Twitter, at Motor City Hoops on Blue Sky, Motor City Hoops Substack. Again, if your favorite team plays the Pistons, I have notes on them. Also, some video breakdowns over there that, you know, if you want to check out why Malik Beasley is leading the NBA in three-point makes, then I have a video for you. Or why Cade Cunningham's so good in ball screens, I have that for you. If we piqued your interest about Jalen Duren, I have a breakdown on him. So some video stuff over there that people have given really good feedback on. And then the Game Theory podcast right here with the Sam Vecini.
Go to The Athletic. Keep me employed over there. I will have rookie rankings next week for The Athletic. So go subscribe. You'll get some breakdowns on, I don't know, who should I write about for rookie rankings this time around? It's a good question.
Have you done Khalil? Have you already written about him?
I wrote about Khalil last time. Yeah. So I don't know if I'll do Khalil this time.
Who was I watching the other day that was finally getting some minutes that I was like, I wonder if he can make a push? I don't remember.
I mean, I might write about Jalen Clark, honestly. Like, Jalen Clark's been very fun. He's not a top 15 rookie this year, which makes it like a little bit tricky to try and like be like, oh yeah, like we're gonna do, you know, Jalen Clark in this week's rookie rankings, right? But yeah, I feel like I'll probably try and find someone to write about at some point. Maybe I didn't do Khalil last time, actually. The last time I did rookie rankings like before the Khalil breakout? Maybe it is. Maybe I will write Khalil, actually. We've talked so much about him that like that's a real thing. And maybe Collier, that's a good name from Shane.
Yeah.
Collier's a good one. Yeah, there's some things happening with the rookies, so I need to do that again. So that'll be like early next week at The Athletic, like probably Monday or Tuesday. I'll probably sit down and write it on Sunday US time. So okay, that's what we got here. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel. Go subscribe to the podcast feed, whatever you're doing. Andrew will have chapters up so that you're not just listening like aimlessly to a 3-hour show. I will make sure Andrew gets on those as soon as possible. But we appreciate it. Until next time, we'll talk soon.